What's up, guys? Welcome to The Fiction Wizard. We've got something special today. Hagrid returned to Privet Drive with the Ministry's custody order, and carried Harry out himself. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The order. The charm Hagrid had placed on the garden wall of number 4, Privet Drive, was a small thing. No bigger than a canute, invisible to anything that wasn't specifically looking, anchored to a loose brick at the bottom of the northwest corner where the mortar had crumbled away. He'd put it there the morning after he left Harry on the doorstep, just slipped it in alongside the letter, a precaution, something to tell him if the boy was cold or hungry or frightened. He'd told himself it was just for the first few weeks. That had been 7 years ago. For 7 years the charm had sent him a faint pulse, once a day, steady as a heartbeat. Green meant fine. Amber meant worried. Red meant something was wrong. For the first month it had pulsed green every day, and Hagrid had let himself breathe, had told himself that Professor Dumbledore knew best and Harry was loved and settled and safe with family. Then the ambers started. Not every day. Not even every week. But enough that Hagrid had gone to Dumbledore twice in the first year alone, hat in hand, asking if perhaps someone ought to check on the boy, and Dumbledore had looked at him with those calm, certain eyes and said Harry was exactly where he needed to be, and that Hagrid's concern, while deeply felt, was perhaps a touch overprotective. After all, every child went through difficult patches. Adjustment took time. Hagrid had gone back to his cottage and watched the charm pulse amber and told himself the headmaster knew best. He was very good at telling himself things. The first red pulse came when Harry was 4 years old. Hagrid had been sharpening a hunting knife at his kitchen table, the kind of task he did on quiet evenings when his hands needed something to do, and the charm, which he kept in a small glass jar on the windowsill, had glowed red so brightly it lit up the whole side of the room like a warning lantern. He'd knocked over his chair getting up. He'd gone to Fleur Dumbledore immediately. Dumbledore had gone to check himself. Had come back and said there'd been a small incident, nothing permanent. Harry had had a brief spell of accidental magic and the Dursleys had been frightened, but everyone was quite alright, and really Hagrid ought not to panic over a single red pulse. These charms weren't perfectly calibrated. Then let me go, Hagrid had said. Let me go and see him. That wouldn't be wise, Dumbledore had said, gently, with that particular gentleness that was also a door closing. Your presence would unsettle the family, Hagrid. The blood wards need calm to hold. You understand. Hagrid had understood. Hagrid had gone back to his cottage and sat in his enormous chair and been very quiet for a long time. He hadn't cried. He wasn't sure, later, why he hadn't. Some feelings were too large even for tears. The red pulses came more often after that. Not constant. Never constant enough that Hagrid could wave the jar in front of the headmaster and say, look at this is what every day is. It was always intermittent, always explainable, always neatly categorized as adjustment, or children go through phases, or accidental magic is traumatic for non-magical families, some friction is inevitable. Dumbledore never dismissed Hagrid's concerns outright. He simply absorbed them and returned them smaller, filed down, smoothed over, until Hagrid came away from every conversation wondering if perhaps he was making a fuss. It was, he'd realize much later, a very particular skill. He was 43 years old. He had half a wand, a cottage full of creatures, and no formal qualifications. He'd been told he wasn't wise enough to raise Harry himself. He'd been told that for 7 years by the wisest man he knew, and he'd believed it, the way you believe things when you're not sure enough of yourself to push back. Then came the morning of the 12th of March. Harry was 7 years and 4 months old. The charm in the glass jar didn't pulse red. It didn't pulse at all. The light went out completely, and Hagrid stood at his window in the grey morning with the jar in both enormous hands and watched the absence of light and felt something settle in his chest like a stone dropping into cold water. Something very quiet and very decided. He put on his coat. He didn't go to Dumbledore. He'd told himself, standing at the window with the dead jar, that he would not go to Dumbledore first. Not this time. If he went to Dumbledore first, he would come away smaller again. He would come away with his worry filed down and his grief smoothed over, and Harry was 7 years old and the light had gone out. He went to the Ministry. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures was where Hagrid usually dealt with the Ministry, when he had to, which he tried to keep to a minimum, since they had an unfortunate file on him that described him as half-giant, expelled, wand privileges revoked, currently employed as gamekeeper in a tone that made all 4 facts sound equally damning. He didn't go there today. He went down 2 levels to a door he'd walked past dozens of times over the years without ever quite stopping at it. The Department of Magical Child and Family Welfare. It was smaller than you'd expect. Tucked between the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes and a broom-closet-sized sub-office that handled something called regulated enchantments on domestic properties. The door was painted a cheerful yellow that had faded to the color of old teeth. There were 4 witches and 2 wizards inside, which was more people than Hagrid had expected. He had to turn sideways to get through the door. He straightened up on the other side and found everyone staring at him. "I need to report a child welfare concern," he said. "About a specific child. Who's been in a specific situation for 7 years and I've had enough of waitin' for someone with more letters after their name than me to do something about it." The witch at the nearest desk, late 50s, gray hair coiled neatly, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down, please," and vanished the chair opposite her desk and transfigured the floor space into something that might hold him. Her name was Constance Hopkirk. Not related to Mafalda, she told him, right off the bat, as though she could tell he was about to ask. She had a quick quotes quill that she kept at a 45-degree angle off to one side, and she had the manner of someone who had heard a great many terrible things in this office and was not going to let that stop her from hearing one more. Hagrid talked for 2 hours. He told her about the charm. He brought the dead jar out of his coat pocket and set it on her desk, and she picked it up and examined it with a careful, unhurried attention that made him feel, for the first time that morning, like he wasn't being managed. He told her about the ambers and the reds and every conversation with Dumbledore, as precisely as he could remember them. He told her who the child was, and he watched her face change, just slightly, just enough to tell him that she understood the weight of it, and he told her that he had been the one to carry this child to that house, and he had never stopped feeling responsible for it, and he was asking her now, officially and formally and with whatever paperwork she needed, to please send someone to check on Harry Potter. Constance Hopkirk put down the glass jar. "The headmaster of Hogwarts instructed you not to pursue this," she said. "It wasn't a question." "He did. And you're here anyway." "I am." She looked at him for another moment. Then she picked up her quill, not the quick quotes one, a plain eagle feather one, and said, "I'm going to need you to sign a formal declaration, Mr. Hagrid. And we are going to need to conduct a home visit before any further steps can be taken. The home visit will be conducted without prior notice to the family and will be documented in full. I need you to understand that this process has a timeline, and that timeline may not feel fast enough, but it is the legally defensible one." "How long?" Hagrid said. "If I expedite it, and I will expedite it, 72 hours to the home visit. Another 48 hours after that for the report to be written and reviewed. If the report substantiates your concerns, we move immediately to either an oversight order or a custody transfer, depending on findings. And if it doesn't substantiate them?" Constance Hopkirk looked at him over the top of her reading glasses, which she'd brought back down to the end of her nose. "Let me see the jar again," she said. He handed it back. She turned it slowly in her fingers, watching the dead space where the light had been. "I've been in this department for 19 years, she said. "A welfare charm going completely dark means one of 2 things. Either the enchantment failed, which does happen, or the child's sense of safety has dropped below the threshold the charm can register." She set the jar down with a deliberate click. "I'll have someone at Privet Drive by tomorrow morning." The home visit happened the next day at 8:15 in the morning. Hagrid wasn't there for it. He spent the morning in his cottage doing tasks with a controlled, focused violence, splitting firewood, cleaning out the ferret hutches, restitching a bridle that didn't actually need restitching, and waiting. Fong sat under the table and watched him with the particular anxious sympathy of a dog who could tell his person was unhappy but had absolutely no tools to address it. Constance flew him at 11. She had been to Privet Drive. She had spoken to Petunia Dursley. She had, as part of the standard welfare visit, asked to see Harry's bedroom. There was a silence on the line after that sentence. "What did ye find?" Hagrid asked. "I'm going to ask you to trust the process," she said, in a tone that told him the process was going to be very firmly on his side. "I need 48 hours to write the report. I want this airtight, Mr. Hagrid. I want there to be absolutely no bureaucratic avenue available to anyone who might want to challenge the outcome. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I do," he said. The firewood he'd been stacking toppled, and he caught it one-handed without looking. "You found something bad." "I found sufficient grounds," she said carefully, "for immediate action." "Then why do we need 48 hours? "Because the magical guardian on record for Harry Potter is Albus Dumbledore," she said. "And I want every piece of this document to be bulletproof before I hand it to a Wisengamot magistrate. Because if Dumbledore challenges the order, and he might, I want him to lose. Do you understand?" Hagrid was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled. Fong inched out from under the table and put his massive head on Hagrid's knee. 48 hours, Hagrid said. 48 hours, she confirmed. She was done in 36. The ministry magistrate signed the custody order at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. Constance flew at Hagrid herself rather than sending an owl, which he thought said something about her. He was already dressed. He'd been dressed for 2 hours. He took the copy of the order she pushed through the flames, warm parchment, a seal that glowed faintly gold, Hagrid's name printed in the section labeled Authorized Custodian in very official ink, and he held it in both hands for a moment, looking at it. "Mr. Hagrid," Constance said. "Yeah. The order is enforceable immediately. You may collect the child today." She paused. "I would recommend taking someone with you. As a witness." "I'll go alone," Hagrid said. Another pause. "The Dursley family may be uncooperative." "I know. You are legally authorized to remove the child with or without their consent. If they attempt to physically obstruct you, Mrs. Hopkirk," Hagrid said, and his voice came out very quiet, very level, "I am 11 feet tall and I have a pink umbrella with half a wand in it and I have been waiting 7 years for this piece of parchment. There is not going to be a problem with the Dursley family." A moment of silence. Then, very quietly, Constance Hopkirk said, "Quite right. Good luck, Mr. Hagrid." He drove the motorbike. He could have operated to the end of the street, but he drove the motorbike because it felt right. It felt like completing something. He'd carried Harry to that house on this bike, wrapped in a bundle with Dumbledore's name on the envelope, and he was going to carry Harry away from it the same way, wind in his hair and the engine loud enough to rattle windows. He parked in the drive. It was 7:30 in the morning. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that suburban streets have just after sunrise when the world hasn't quite committed to the day yet. The houses were identical and neat and soulless, and number 4 looked exactly like every other house except that there were bars on the smallest upstairs window. Hagrid looked at those bars for a moment. Then he walked up to the front door and knocked on it hard enough to rattle it on its hinges. There was a thump from inside, then shuffling, then the sound of Vernon Dursley's voice saying something indistinct that had the general shape of outrage. The door opened. Vernon was in a dressing gown, enormous and purple-faced, and he had clearly been expecting anyone in the world except the person standing on his doorstep, because his face went through about 6 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds before settling on something that wanted to be imperious but was shading rapidly toward frightened. "You," he said. "Morning," said Hagrid cheerfully. Got a couple things ter tell ya and one thing ter do. Mind if I come in? Absolutely, thanks, Hagrid said, and stepped forward. Vernon actually pressed himself back against the hallway wall. The doorframe was not built for Hagrid and he had to angle himself through it, which took a moment, but he managed, and came out the other side into a hallway that smelled of bleach and fried eggs and a faint undertone of something else, something old and unhappy that Hagrid couldn't quite name. He stood in the hall and looked around. Framed photographs of a blond boy at various stages of outgrowing his clothes. A coat rack with 4 coats on it. A 5th peg, empty, lowest to the ground, with nothing hanging on it. You can't just, Vernon was saying. This is my house, this is private property, you people can't just, I'm not you people, Hagrid said. I'm one specific person, and I've got a legal custody order signed by a ministry magistrate given me the authority to collect Harry Potter from this address. He unfolded the parchment and held it out toward Vernon. You don't have to touch it if ye don't want. But I'd advise ye to read it. Vernon's eyes went to the parchment. Hagrid watched the man's face do something complicated and ugly. From the kitchen doorway, Petunia appeared. She was thinner than he remembered. She had her arms crossed over her chest like armor, and she was looking at the parchment the way some people look at things that confirm fears they've been carrying for a long time. What is that? She said. A custody order, Hagrid said, and he looked at Petunia very directly, not unkindly but not gently either. The ministry's child welfare department did a home visit 2 days ago. Based on what they found, they've authorized me to take Harry Turlive with me. Today. Now. Based on what they found, Vernon repeated, his voice climbing an octave. Based on what they found, I don't know what that woman thought she saw, but this family has provided everything that boy, where is he? Hagrid said. The question landed in the hallway like something dropped from a height. Not loud. Just very definite. Hagrid wasn't angry, exactly. He'd made a decision somewhere in the last 48 hours not to waste energy on anger at the Dursleys, because anger at the Dursleys would require him to look at them as the main problem, and they weren't the main problem. They were awful, limited, frightened people who'd been given a child they didn't want and no support and told to get on with it. That didn't excuse anything. But it located the blame somewhere more complicated. He's in his room, Petunia said. Something shifted in her face. He's sleeping. I'll go up. You can't, I can, Hagrid said, with the custody order still in his hand, gently. I'm sorry, Mrs. Dursley. I am. But I'm going to go and get him now. Vernon stepped forward. He was a large man by any ordinary standard, a broad-shouldered wall of outraged English propriety, and he moved like he meant to physically block the staircase. He managed about 3 seconds of that before his hindbrain caught up with his forebrain and reminded him that the person he was trying to block was roughly the size of a wardrobe and had a look on his face that was completely, peacefully immovable. I'll be taking his things, if he has any, Hagrid said, already at the foot of the stairs. Shouldn't take long. He went up. Harry Potter was sleeping in a cupboard. Hagrid stood in the upstairs hallway and looked at the small door under the staircase that was, yes, technically, at the top of the stairs and not under them in the architectural sense, but was still, unmistakably, a cupboard. The smallest one in the house, the one that on the plans would say storage or perhaps nothing at all. There was a small bolt on the outside, slid back, and a child's name painted on it in the clumsiest possible letters because a 7-year-old had done it himself, Harry. He stood there for a moment. Just stood there. Then he opened the door. Harry Potter was asleep on a cot that was about 2/3 the right size for him, on a mattress that had seen better decades, under a single blanket that he'd pulled all the way over his head so that all Hagrid could see was a dark tuft of hair sticking out of one end. The cupboard smelled like dust and old shoes. There was a shelf above the cot with 3 things on it, a broken toy soldier, a small rock that had been painted to look like a frog, and a birthday card that Hagrid recognized as one he'd sent 2 years ago because he hadn't known if Harry was allowed mail and had sent it anyway through a Muggle postal service, addressed to the boy in the cupboard. He'd kept the birthday card. It was the only birthday card on the shelf. Hagrid's hands, which were the size of dustbin lids, were not shaking. He breathed in very slowly through his nose. He breathed out again. He crouched down, which brought him close to the low ceiling, and he put one enormous hand gently on the shape of Harry's shoulder through the blanket. "Harry," he said, as quietly as a man his size could manage. Harry came awake the way Hagrid had sometimes seen animals wake when they'd been badly startled once too often in their sleep, instantly, completely, pulling the blanket down and pressing back against the wall in one movement. His glasses weren't on. His eyes were blurry and wide and he was trying very hard, Hagrid could see, not to show that he was frightened. He looked so small. He was small, undersized for 7, clearly, and thin in a way that sat wrong. But mostly he looked small the way things look small when they've been kept in small spaces. There was something careful in the set of his shoulders, something watchful and measured in how he was looking at Hagrid, like he was already calculating what reaction this situation required. "Hey," Hagrid managed. "Hey. It's all right. D'ya remember me?" Harry blinked. He stared at the enormous figure crammed into his cupboard doorway. Something moved across his face, recognition, but cautious, the way a stray animal recognizes a person who was kind to it once, not ready to trust that the kindness is still true. "The big man," Harry said. His voice was a little hoarse, like he hadn't spoken yet today. I remember you. From before. When I was really little." "That's right," Hagrid said. He was smiling, though his throat was very tight. "I'm Hagrid. I brought ya here when you were a baby. I've been," he stopped. He hadn't planned what he was going to say. He'd planned the ministry visit, the legal order, the confrontation with the Dursleys. He hadn't planned this moment, this small blinking boy on a too small cot. "I've been keepin' an eye on ya. From far away. With a charm." He reached into his coat pocket and brought out the glass jar with the dead light. "This was supposed to tell me you were okay. And it stopped workin' 3 days ago." Harry looked at the jar. He looked at it with an expression that was too complicated for 7, that had too many layers. "What does it do when someone's okay?" he asked. "Glows green." Harry said nothing for a moment. "What did it do before it stopped?" Hagrid's throat got tighter. "It went red a lot." Harry nodded. He looked at the jar for another second, then looked up at Hagrid's face with those blurry, serious eyes, and said, "Are you here to take me somewhere?" "I am," Hagrid said. "If you want ter come. I've got a paper from the ministry, it's legal, it's done, your aunt and uncle can't say no. But I'm a skin, yeah." He paused. He looked at this boy who'd been making calculations about what reaction situations required since he was old enough to be frightened by the wrong reaction, and he said, very carefully, "I'm a skin, yeah, Harry. Do ya want ter come with me?" Harry looked around the cupboard. He looked at the broken toy soldier and the painted rock frog and the birthday card with Hagrid's name in it, which was the only card on the shelf, and then he looked back at Hagrid. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I want to come." "Right," Hagrid said, and his voice only broke a little. "Right then. Let's get your things." There weren't many things. A few clothes from a bin bag under the cot, mostly too big for him. The toy soldier. The painted rock. The birthday card, which Harry folded very carefully and put in his trouser pocket. Hagrid gathered all of it in approximately 45 seconds. Harry got dressed in the cupboard while Hagrid stood in the hallway and watched the master bedroom door at the end of the corridor, which remained firmly shut. Dudley Dursley was presumably still asleep in the large bedroom to the left. There was noise behind that door, a TV on low, the particular thick breathing of a child in a deep morning sleep. Harry's eyes went to it for just a moment as he came out of the cupboard with his shoes in his hand, then away again. "My cousin," he said, very neutrally. "I know," Hagrid said. Harry nodded and put his shoes on in the hallway with a practiced efficiency that said he usually did this here, in this exact spot. Then he straightened up, took a breath, and looked up at Hagrid with his arms a little out from his sides and a look on his face that said, simply, "I'm ready." Hagrid took Harry's bin bag in one hand. Then, because it felt right, because Harry was 7 years old and small and had been living in a cupboard, he bent down and picked Harry up under the arms and settled him against his chest the way he'd carried him as a baby, except that Harry was now considerably larger and could put his arms around Hagrid's neck. Harry went still for a second when Hagrid lifted him, that same animal careful stillness, and then something in his small body relaxed all at once, like a fist unclenching, and he put his arms around Hagrid's neck and held on. He didn't cry. Hagrid didn't either. They went down the stairs. Vernon and Petunia were in the hallway. Vernon was fully himself by now, dressing gown, purple face, righteous architecture of middle-class English grievance, and he had positioned himself at the bottom of the stairs with the specific intention of making this moment as dramatic as possible, which was a miscalculation on his part because the moment was already happening without any assistance from him. "Now see here," he began. Hagrid came down the last 2 steps with Harry in his arms and the bin bag in his other hand and the custody order tucked into his breast pocket, and he looked at Vernon Dursley with an expression that was not aggressive and not unkind and not afraid, that was simply, fully done. "You'll be hearing from the Ministry," Hagrid said. "Mrs. Hopkirk's department. There's likely going to be a formal review. I'd advise ya to cooperate with it fully." He looked past Vernon to Petunia. She was standing very still with her arms still crossed and her face doing something Hagrid couldn't entirely read. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't grief, it was something smaller and more ordinary than either of those, the look of someone watching a consequence arrive that they've been not looking at for years. "Mrs. Dursley," Hagrid said. And then, because he'd been raised by people who believed in manners even when manners were extremely hard, "I know this wasn't what ya wanted. Having him here. I know it was hard." He paused. Harry was quiet against his chest, listening. But it was harder for him. Petunia's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Hagrid walked to the door. It was still standing open from when he'd come in. He managed it one-handed, the bin bag over his shoulder, Harry held secure. Behind him, Vernon made a sound like a kettle building toward a whistle, that compressed, furious pressure of a man who has just lost something he thought he owned and has no legal recourse. "You can't just," Vernon said. Hagrid stepped out onto Privet Drive in the early morning sun, and the door closed behind him. Outside, the street was still quiet. A few birds. A milk float 3 houses down. The motorbike sat in the Dursleys' drive with its chrome catching the light, perfectly ordinary except for the slight shimmer around it that told you it had ideas above its station. Hagrid stood on the front step for a moment. Harry was looking at the bike with an expression that, for the first time this morning, wasn't careful or measured or watchful. It was just interested. "Is that yours?" Harry asked. "Borrowed it, originally," Hagrid said. "Never quite gave it back. D'ya want to ride it?" Harry looked at him. "I've never ridden a motorbike." "Most 7-year-olds haven't," Hagrid agreed. "Hold on tight and don't lean out, it's perfectly safe." He settled Harry on the tank in front of him, positioned with the handlebars on either side like a cage, and Harry put both hands on the one bar he could reach and sat straight-backed with a slightly stunned expression, and Hagrid thought he looked like someone who'd just been told that an unexpected good thing was actually real. The engine started with a sound like a very happy dragon. Harry startled slightly, then laughed, a short surprised sound, not quite used to itself, like a laugh that had been out of practice. It was the best sound Hagrid had heard in a very long time. "Right," Hagrid said, putting the bike in gear. "Off we go, then." They went down Privet Drive and turned the corner and the whole tidy, terrible street fell away behind them, and Harry's hair went wild in the wind, and Hagrid drove north through the early morning toward the Scottish Highlands, and the charm in the glass jar in his breast pocket, pressed between his ribs and the custody order and the birthday card's twin, the one he'd kept himself, pulsed, very softly, green. Chapter 2, The Hut. The cottage looked different in summer. Harry had seen it first in March, when the Scottish Highlands were still grey and bitten with cold, the loch flat and pewter-coloured under a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. The cottage had looked warm then, amber light in the window, smoke from the chimney, Fong's enormous shape moving behind the glass, and Harry, 7 years old and still slightly stunned from the motorbike ride, had thought it looked like the kind of place that existed in books rather than in the actual world. By July it looked like something else entirely. The garden, which Hagrid tended with the same enthusiastic imprecision he applied to most things, had erupted into a controlled chaos of vegetables the size of small boulders, flowers in colors that had no business existing this far north, and various plants that Harry had learned not to touch without asking first. The loch was blue today, actually blue, and the mountains behind it were the purple-green of deep summer, and Hogwarts Castle sat on its promontory above the water looking exactly as improbable as it always did. Harry sat on the fence at the edge of the pumpkin patch, eating an apple and watching Hagrid argue with a niffler. "Give it back," Hagrid said. The niffler, which had been confiscated from a third-year student 6 weeks ago and was still technically in quarantine pending rehoming, pressed itself flat to the ground and covered its bill with both front paws, which was either a gesture of defiance or an attempt to become invisible. "I can see ya," Hagrid said. The niffler made a sound like a small, indignant bellows. "I don't care where ya found it. It's my pocket watch." Hagrid crouched down, which brought him roughly level with the top of the fence where Harry was sitting. "Don't look at me like that. I know you know where it is. You've got a pouch, where else would it?" He reached out one large hand and, with the practiced ease of a man who had done this many times, tipped the niffler gently onto its back, unfolded the pouch on its stomach, and retrieved a pocket watch, a brass button, 2 nuts, and what appeared to be a soup spoon. "Where'd it get the spoon?" Harry asked. "No idea," Hagrid said. He set the niffler upright. It looked at him with an expression of profound betrayal and then turned around and waddled with great dignity back toward its enclosure. "That's the 3rd time this week. Clever little things. Smarter than they look." "You say that about all of them." "All of them are smarter than they look." Hagrid pocketed his watch and sat down on the upturned water trough he used as a bench, which groaned under him but held. "You finished that reading I set ya?" Harry took another bite of apple. "Mostly. Mostly isn't finished. The chapter about flobberworms is 14 pages long and nothing happens in it. Nothing. They eat and they sit there. For 14 pages. There's a reason I had ya read it. Is the reason to teach me patience?" Hagrid looked at him with a slight squinting expression that meant he was trying not to smile. "The reason is that flobberworm mucus is an ingredient in 11 different potions, and 3 of those potions have no magical substitute for it, and one of them is the base compound for a treatment that keeps hippogriff wounds from going septic." He paused. "Also patience." Harry conceded this with a tilt of his head and finished his apple. This was what their days looked like, mostly. They had a rough shape. Mornings were lessons, afternoons were practical work with the creatures, evenings were whatever they wanted, which usually meant Hagrid cooking something spectacular while Harry sat at the kitchen table reading or doing the calculations Hagrid had set him from a Muggle mathematics book, because Hagrid, who had left school under circumstances that precluded finishing his education, had very decided views about what Harry ought to know. "You might not need to know how numbers work," he'd said, early on, setting the book in front of Harry with the slightly embarrassed confidence of someone who'd spent 3 months preparing for a conversation. "But ya might. And I'd rather ya had it and didn't need it than needed it and didn't have it." He'd said essentially the same thing about botany, astronomy, not just the wizard kind, the actual kind, the whole sky, Latin, English grammar, and the history of the wizarding world from primary sources rather than just Hogwarts, a history, because Hagrid felt very strongly that history should be argued with. Harry had taken to all of it with a speed that was sometimes slightly alarming and always asked why. Not defiantly. Not the practiced helpless why of a child trying to avoid doing the thing. Genuinely, specifically, with a follow-up question already assembled before the first one was answered. Hagrid had told him once that it was like teaching a very small person who'd been saving up questions for 7 years and had recently discovered the storeroom was unlocked. Which was, in a sense, exactly what it was. The first few weeks had been hard in ways that neither of them had exactly anticipated. Harry had been fine, outwardly. Unnervingly fine, in the way that very controlled children are fine, polite and helpful and quiet, eating everything put in front of him with a concentrated attention that said something bleak about how often he'd had enough food before, and making himself small in the cottage's spaces as though he was still working out whether he was allowed to be in them. Hagrid had noticed. He didn't say anything about it directly because he had a feeling that saying anything directly would cause Harry to perform fineness even harder, and that wasn't what either of them needed. Instead he'd just been steady. Set places at the table and made sure Harry knew it was his place. Showed him the room that was now his room, small by cottage standards, enormous by cupboard standards, with an actual window that looked out over the pumpkin patch and a bed that fit him and a bookshelf that Hagrid had cleared specifically, and said, "It's yours. Ya can put things in it." Harry had stood in the doorway of his room for a long moment. Then he'd taken the broken toy soldier and the painted rock frog and the folded birthday card out of his pockets and lined them up on the bookshelf with a careful, deliberate precision, and then he'd turned around, and his face had done something complicated and fast that he'd covered over immediately, but Hagrid had seen it. "Thank you," Harry had said, very precisely. "No need to thank me," Hagrid had said. "It's just a room." "I know," Harry had said, and the way he said it made very clear that he knew it was not just a room. It had taken about a month for the careful watchfulness to start coming apart. Not all at once, it would come and go for longer than that, the way old habits do, but in small pieces. He'd stopped apologizing for taking food when he was hungry. He'd started leaving his shoes in the wrong place and not immediately correcting it. He'd argued, one afternoon in May, with genuine heat and without any apparent calculation about what reaction the argument would produce, about whether or not Hagrid's solution to the knot puzzle in the Care of Magical Creatures book was actually correct. He'd been right, as it happened. The solution was wrong. Hagrid had looked it up in 3 other sources and admitted defeat. Harry had looked delighted in a way that was entirely undisguised. After that the arguments came regularly, and Hagrid counted each one as a small victory. In June, Dumbledore came. He arrived, as he generally did, unannounced, appearing at the garden gate in the early evening with his half-moon glasses and his silver beard and his long purple robes that were slightly impractical for the Scottish Highlands and didn't appear to care. He had a small package under one arm. Harry was in the vegetable patch. He'd been there for an hour, ostensibly weeding, actually mostly examining things with the kind of fixed attention he gave to anything that interested him, which at this particular moment appeared to be a family of bowtruckles that had established themselves in the bean poles without permission. He looked up when the gate opened. He looked at Dumbledore and went quiet in a particular way. Hagrid, at the cottage door, had known this visit was coming. They'd talked, or exchanged increasingly terse owls, more accurately, after the custody order was finalized. The conversation had been, in the technical sense, civil. It had also contained several things that both of them had waited a very long time to say. "Albus," Hagrid said. "Hagrid," Dumbledore said. He was looking at Harry. He smiled, the particular warm, intentional smile that Hagrid had once found entirely reassuring and now found several other things as well. "And Harry, I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." Harry got to his feet and walked toward the gate without hurrying. He was examining Dumbledore the same way he examined everything new, thoroughly, without much self-consciousness about the fact that he was doing it. "Professor Dumbledore," he said. "Hagrid talks about you." "Does he?" Dumbledore said warmly. I hope kindly. Mostly, Harry said. There was a pause. He says you're the cleverest person he knows. He also says sometimes clever people make decisions about what's good for people without actually checking with the people. Another pause, and Hagrid had a brief internal moment of both pride and horror simultaneously. Are you going to have tea? I would love some, Dumbledore said. He looked, briefly, at Hagrid, and Hagrid looked back at him, and the look between them contained approximately 40 years of friendship and one significant fracture and the ongoing question of whether that fracture was going to widen or close. They had tea. Dumbledore gave Harry the package, which contained 3 books, one on magical theory, one that appeared to be a book of Muggle science that Dumbledore had somehow found and which contained a section on particle physics that Harry later read 3 times, and one that was a collection of stories in Latin. Harry received them with genuine pleasure that he didn't disguise, said thank you and meant it, and then took them to his room with the air of someone who had other things to do and would be back when interesting things were happening, which left Hagrid and Dumbledore at the kitchen table. He's extraordinary, Dumbledore said. I know, Hagrid said. You've done very well with him. He's done well with himself. I just gave him somewhere to do it. Hagrid wrapped both hands around his mug. I know what you're going to say, Albus. I'm not going to say anything you need to defend yourself against, Dumbledore said, quietly. I made a decision 7 years ago that I was certain was right. Circumstances have indicated that I was wrong in important ways, and I am. He stopped. For a moment he looked old, which he rarely permitted. I am sorry, Hagrid. For what Harry went through, and for dismissing your concerns about it. Hagrid was quiet for a moment. It wasn't the apology he'd been expecting, which had been the other kind, the kind that came with explanations already attached. This one sat on its own. The blood wards, Hagrid said. Were they ever real? They were real, Dumbledore said. They were also, perhaps, something I allowed to carry more weight in my calculations than they deserved. He looked at his hands. It is very easy, I find, to decide that a sacrifice is necessary when you are not the one making it. The kitchen was quiet. From Harry's room came the faint sound of pages turning. He's going to Hogwarts, Hagrid said. When he's 11. And I'm going to keep being his guardian, and his home is going to be here, not somewhere you decide is more strategic. Those things aren't negotiable. I know, Dumbledore said. And whatever plans you've got, Hagrid. Dumbledore looked up. There was something in his eyes that Hagrid couldn't fully read, the habitual opacity of a man who had kept his own counsel for decades. But underneath it, or around it, something that looked like genuine weight. I will try to be less certain about what's necessary. That's the best I can offer. It's something, Hagrid said. They finished their tea. Harry came back from his room with the particle physics book and asked Dumbledore what he thought about whether magical energy might be a specific type of quantum phenomenon, which was a question that seemed to delight Dumbledore considerably. The rest of the evening was unexpectedly fine. Not easy, but fine. Dumbledore left at 10 and gave Harry his hand to shake at the gate, and Harry shook it and looked up at him and said, "Will you come back?" "Often, if you'll have me," Dumbledore said. "You can come back," Harry said. "But I'm going to keep arguing with you about the things I think you're wrong about." "I would be disappointed," Dumbledore said, "if you didn't." Harry seemed satisfied with this and went inside. Dumbledore stood at the gate and looked at Hagrid over his half-moon glasses with an expression that was difficult to parse. "He doesn't know," Dumbledore said quietly. "About the prophecy. About what's coming." "I'd prefer, I know ya would," Hagrid said. "I haven't told him." "Thank you." "I haven't told him," Hagrid said carefully, "because I think he'll be ready to hear it when he's older, not because I think ya get to decide when and how. Just so we're clear." A long pause. The stars over the loch were extraordinary. "Quite clear," Dumbledore said. "Good night, Hagrid." August brought the incident with the ministry official. His name was Tiberius Ogden, and he was not the same Ogden who had anything to do with Mead. This Ogden was a minor undersecretary for Magical Guardian Affairs, a title he wore with the self-importance of someone who'd worked very hard for something very small. He arrived with a clipboard and a self-inking quill and the specific energy of a bureaucrat who has found a technicality. Constance Hopkirk had sent Hagrid a warning owl 2 days prior. The custody order was airtight, she'd written, but there was a faction within the ministry who felt that the ongoing guardianship of the boy who lived by a half-giant with a snapped wand and no formal magical qualifications represented an unacceptable risk to a child of significant historical importance, and that faction had found someone willing to conduct a formal suitability review. Hagrid had read this owl at the kitchen table while Harry was doing his morning reading. Harry had looked up from his book and read Hagrid's face and said, "What is it?" Hagrid had folded the letter. "Ministry business. Nothing you need to worry about." Harry had looked at him for a moment with those eyes that missed nothing. "You're worried about it." "A bit," Hagrid had admitted. "Is it about me staying here?" "Someone wants to do a review. Make sure I'm suitable." Which, he'd stopped, because the honest end of that sentence was which I might not be, by their standards, because their standards were made for people like them and I have never been people like them, and he didn't want to put that weight on Harry. Harry had closed his book. "We should talk about what we do if they decide you're not suitable," he'd said, with the pragmatic calm of a child who has learned to plan for bad outcomes. "What are the options?" Hagrid had looked at him. "You're not worried?" "I'm not going back to Privet Drive," Harry had said, with a flatness that wasn't dramatic, just certain. "So whatever the options are, that's not one of them. Let's think about what else there is." They'd spent an hour at the kitchen table going through possibilities, and by the end of it Hagrid had realized that the child he was supposedly protecting was doing more of the tactical thinking than he was, which was both somewhat embarrassing and also quietly wonderful. Ogden arrived on a Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. He was a thin wizard with sharp elbows and the manner of someone perpetually disappointed by the quality of the things around him. He looked at the cottage, at the garden, at the various magical creature enclosures visible through the fence, at Fong, who had come out to greet him with enormous enthusiasm and had immediately put both paws on his shoulders, which brought Ogden's face level with Fong's, and this had not gone well, and he wrote things on his clipboard with the self-inking quill, and his face communicated volumes about his findings. Harry was sitting on the fence when Ogden came through the gate. He hopped down and stood next to Hagrid. Ogden looked at Harry. He looked at him with an expression that contained several things, the slight reverence that Harry had started to recognize as people seeing the scar before they saw the face, the calculation of a bureaucrat assessing an asset, and something else underneath both of those that was something like pity. As though Harry were a problem that had found an inadequate solution. "Harry Potter," Ogden said. "That's me," Harry said. "And you've been living here for," Ogden consulted his clipboard. "5 months. 4 months and 3 weeks, Harry said precisely. "Since March 12th. Ogden blinked. He seemed faintly off balance, which was presumably not the experience he'd planned to have. "Yes. And you find the environment suitable?" Harry looked around the garden. He looked at the pumpkin patch and the creature enclosures and the lock behind the cottage and Hogwarts on its hill. He looked at Hagrid. "Yeah," he said. "It's my home." "Right," Ogden said. He wrote something. "And in terms of your education, I can show you," Harry said. Not aggressively, not defensively. Just offering. He looked at Ogden with an expression that was perfectly pleasant and entirely steady, and he said, "If you want to check what I know. We can do that." Ogden blinked again. He had, Hagrid could tell, arrived expecting an easily overwhelmed child and a defensive, blundering half-giant, and what he'd found instead was making his clipboard less useful as a prop. Yes, that would be appropriate. "Academically, Hagrid teaches me mornings," Harry said. "We do natural history and magical theory and mathematics and Latin and proper history, not just the wizard bits. This week I've been reading about magical ecosystems, specifically how magical creature populations interact with ambient magical fields in high magic areas like this one. He looked at Ogden with a slight tilt of his head. Do you want to discuss it? I've got opinions about the flobberworm section. Ogden stared at him. He really does, Hagrid confirmed. He'll be there for a while. The suitability review took 2 hours. Ogden was thorough, or tried to be. He inspected the cottage, assessed the sleeping arrangements, reviewed the creatures, asked Harry 17 questions of increasing specificity about his education and welfare, and received 17 precise, thoughtful answers that gave him absolutely nothing to write negatively about. He found the kitchen clean and the food stores well stocked. He found Harry to be, in the clinical language of the ministry form, physically healthy, cognitively advanced, emotionally well-adjusted, and demonstrably secure in his living situation. He found, at the bottom of Harry's bookshelf alongside the 3 books from Dumbledore and the half-dozen Hagrid had added, the birthday card that Harry had brought from Privet Drive, now considerably flattened from the journey in his pocket, standing propped against the wall. He wrote for a long time on the clipboard. Then he looked up at Hagrid. The ministry's concerns, he said, and he was choosing his words with more care now than when he'd arrived, were primarily focused on the suitability of the Guardian. A pause. Based on this review, I have no grounds to challenge the existing custody arrangement. Another pause, this one with more weight. None whatsoever. Right, Hagrid said. Ogden clicked his quill closed. He looked at Harry once more, not with the pity this time, not with the scar-first reverence. Something more complicated, and perhaps more honest. The ministry will be notified of my findings, he said. I don't anticipate further reviews. Good, Harry said pleasantly. Ogden left. He had managed about 20 feet down the path toward the apparition point when Harry, sitting back on the fence, said quietly, he was going to try to take me to somewhere they could watch me more closely. That's what it was actually about, wasn't it? Hagrid looked at him. Where d'ya get that from? The questions he asked weren't about whether you're a good guardian, Harry said. They were about whether I'd say I'd rather be somewhere else. Somewhere with more, he kept saying, resources and structured environment. Those aren't welfare words. Those are management words. He picked up his apple from where he'd left it on the fence post. I looked at what he wrote on the clipboard when he was writing. That's, Harry, that's someone's private notes. It was upside down and he was right in front of me, Harry said reasonably. I can read upside down, you taught me Latin, the principle's the same. Hagrid stared at him for a moment. Then he sat down on the water trough and rubbed his face with both hands and felt a feeling that was extremely complicated but had a lot of warmth in it. You are something else, he said. Is that bad? No, Hagrid said. That's the best thing I can tell ya. September passed and then October, and the rhythm of the cottage settled into itself with the specific comfort of things that have been arranged correctly. Harry learned the names and habits of every creature in Hagrid's care and developed strong individual opinions about most of them. He read with a speed that was nearly alarming, stacking finished books in teetering piles that migrated around the cottage with him. He argued. He laughed, more and more often, in the easy unconsidered way of someone who'd stopped calculating whether it was safe to. He was genuinely terrible at sitting still and genuinely extraordinary at everything else. He started asking about Hogwarts in October. Not nervously. With the forward-leaning interest he gave to all things, questions piling up on each other. What were the classes like? Which was the best subject? Could you really make things fly? Was Quidditch as good as it sounded in the books? Was it true that the staircases moved? Hagrid answered everything he could and said you'll see to the rest, and watched Harry absorb it all with his eyes lit up in a way that was specifically new, specifically future-facing, a child looking forward rather than managing the present. There was one evening in November when Harry came into the kitchen while Hagrid was cooking and sat at the table and was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that had something behind it. What is it? Hagrid said. I was thinking about Hogwarts, Harry said. He was turning a canute over and over between his fingers. About being sorted. About what house I'd be in. Hagrid waited. There was more. I don't know if I want to be the boy who lived there, Harry said. Not distressed. Thinking out loud, which he did with Hagrid in a way he didn't seem to do with anyone else. I know that's what people will see. I know about the scar and the night with my parents. You explained it. I've read about it. He paused. I just don't want that to be all I am to people. It won't be, Hagrid said. You can't know that. No, Hagrid agreed. I can't. But I know what you are. Which is a person, a proper one, with opinions about flobberworms and terrible handwriting and a competitive streak about 3 times the size of the rest of ya. The people at Hogwarts who matter will figure that out. The ones who don't, he shrugged one enormous shoulder. Well, you've had worse critics than a few classmates. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, small but real. My handwriting isn't that bad. It's atrocious, Hagrid said lovingly. Absolute disaster. I've gotten better letters from Fong, and he writes with his nose. Harry threw the canute at him. It bounced off Hagrid's shoulder and skittered across the kitchen floor, and Fong immediately emerged from under the table to investigate, and Harry laughed, that easy unconsidered laugh, and the kitchen smelled like whatever Hagrid was cooking and the November dark pressed close against the windows and the fire was going, and it was, Hagrid thought, stirring the pot, just exactly what it was supposed to be. 3 years passed this way. Not smoothly, nothing worth having is smooth. Harry got sick in the second winter, properly sick, a magical fever that rattled the windows when it peaked and required Madame Pomfrey to come to the cottage at 2 in the morning, and she had stood in the kitchen afterward drinking tea and told Hagrid, with professional calm and personal feeling, that Harry's immune system was doing the best it could with what it had. She'd looked at Hagrid over the cup. He'd nodded. They hadn't needed to say the rest. There was a confrontation with 3 older Hogwarts students in the village in Harry's second summer who'd recognized the scar and said some things about the half-giant in Harry's company that had apparently required a response, and Harry had given them one, verbally and at length, with a clarity and composure that had left them considerably smaller than when they'd started. He'd told Hagrid about it that evening, matter-of-factly, and Hagrid had been briefly concerned about whether he should say something about restraint and then looked at Harry's face and decided against it. Dumbledore visited regularly. The fracture between him and Hagrid didn't close entirely, some fractures don't, but it became something they worked around and through, and Dumbledore's visits with Harry were, increasingly, the best part of them. They argued about magic and history and science and Dumbledore was never condescending and Harry was never deferential, and watching them together Hagrid thought that this was perhaps what Dumbledore had been hoping to find in Harry all along, without quite understanding what conditions would actually produce it. Hagrid taught Harry to fly on a school broom borrowed from the Hogwarts supply cupboard in the spring of the second year. Harry took to it with an instantaneous, physical certainty that was a little startling, not reckless, exactly, but committed, the kind of flyer who doesn't fight the broom because they've decided not to be afraid of it. Hagrid had watched him from the ground, banking over the loch in the grey spring morning, and thought, Quidditch is going to be something. The letter came in July, 3 years after Hagrid had carried Harry out of Privet Drive. It arrived by owl, which it always did, a large, serious Hogwarts owl who landed on the kitchen table with great solemnity and presented the envelope to Harry directly. Harry took it, examined the green ink, turned it over to look at the wax seal. He was 10 years and 11 months old and he looked up at Hagrid with those green eyes that had stopped being careful a long time ago, and he was grinning with the full force of it. "Is this it?" he asked. "That's it," Hagrid said. Harry broke the seal and read it quickly, twice, then looked up again. "Hagrid." "Yeah. I'm going to need a wand." "I know," Hagrid said. "And the books. And robes." Harry was still grinning. He was up from the table already, the letter held in one hand, moving with the forward momentum of someone who has been pointed at something for 3 years and has just been given permission to go. When do we go to Diagon Alley? Can we go soon? Can we go tomorrow? We can go tomorrow, Hagrid said. Harry was already at the doorway to his room, and then he stopped and turned back, and his grinning settled into something slightly different, something that was less about Hogwarts and more about this moment, this kitchen, this particular morning. "Hey, Hagrid," he said. "Yeah?" Harry looked at him for a moment. He was 10 years old and 3 years from a cupboard under the stairs, and he said, simply and without a single gram of performance in it, "I'm glad you came to get me." Hagrid's chest did something considerable. He managed, after a moment, "Me too, Harry." "Me too." Harry grinned again and disappeared into his room to start a list, because he was exactly the kind of person who started lists immediately, and Hagrid sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the open door for a moment, and Fong put his head on Hagrid's knee, and outside the window the loch was very blue under the summer sky. Tomorrow they'd go to Diagon Alley. Next month Harry would get on the Hogwarts Express. And the world had very little idea what was coming for it. Chapter 3. The boy who arrived Diagon Alley was loud and bright and smelled like burnt sugar and old parchment and something underneath both of those that Harry couldn't name but felt in his teeth, a low, persistent hum, like the air itself was paying attention. He stood just inside the entrance from the leaky cauldron and looked at it with his head slightly tilted, cataloguing. "Well?" Hagrid said, from somewhere above his left ear. "It's brilliant," Harry said. He started walking. Hagrid had to lengthen his stride to keep up, which said something, because Hagrid's stride was already approximately the length of a small car. Harry moved through the alley with the interested directness of someone who had been reading about a place for 3 years and was now going through it, checking things off against a mental list, pausing to look at things in windows without being derailed by them, already orienting toward Gringotts at the far end. They did Gringotts first, and the vault, and the minecart ride, which Harry experienced with the focused enjoyment of someone who has decided that if the cart is going to go this fast then they are going to pay full attention to what that feels like. He stood at the vault with the gold light washing over him and looked at the potter's fortune with an expression that was thoughtful rather than awed. "It's a lot," he said. "It is," Hagrid agreed. "I don't need to spend it all." "Nobody said ya did." Harry took what he needed, put the rest back, and said thank you to the goblin in what turned out to be passable gobbledygook. He'd found a translation guide in Hagrid's bookshelf the previous winter and apparently done something with it, and the goblin looked at him with an expression that wasn't quite surprise but was adjacent to it, and inclined his head a fraction. "Outside," Hagrid said, "where'd ya learn that?" "Your shelf." The Ragnarok Guide. Chapters 4 through 7 are basically a phrasebook if you read them right. Harry was looking at the list he'd made. Madame Malkin's first, then the bookshop, then the wand. "I want to do the wand last." "Why last?" Harry looked up from his list. "Because it feels like the most important thing and I don't want to be thinking about the other stuff while it's happening." Hagrid looked at him for a moment and then nodded once, the specific nod that meant "You've thought about this more carefully than I could have and I respect that." Madame Malkin's was already occupied. A blond boy was standing on one of the fitting stools, a witch pinning his robes, and he looked up when Harry climbed onto the adjacent stool with the expression of someone who'd been bored and had just found something more interesting. "Hogwarts too?" he said. "Hogwarts too," Harry said. "Draco Malfoy." He offered this the way some people offer surnames, like a credential. "Harry Potter." The reaction was immediate. It moved across Draco Malfoy's face in a clear, readable sequence: recognition, significance, recalibration. His eyes went to the forehead. Harry watched this without particular feeling and waited for Draco to catch up to himself. "I've heard about you," Draco said, landing on this as a recovery. "Most people have," Harry said, not unkindly. "What have you heard?" This was apparently not the expected response. Draco blinked. Then something in him shifted sideways from the prepared script and he said, more genuinely, "That you beat you-know-who when you were a baby." That nobody knows how. A pause. My father says it was luck. What do you think? Harry asked. Another blink. Clearly this was a very disorienting morning for Draco Malfoy. I don't know. I was too. Me too, Harry said. I don't remember it either. Seems strange to have strong opinions about something nobody remembers. Madame Malkin came to adjust Harry's collar, and Draco was quiet for a moment. When she moved away, he said, carefully, like he was testing something, "Who are you living with?" "The rumors say, Hagrid," Harry said. "He's right outside. Big bloke, you probably saw him on the way in." "The groundskeeper." Draco said it with a neutrality that was trying quite hard to be something else. His family, clearly, had opinions about Hagrid. "And gamekeeper." "And my guardian," Harry said. "He's the best teacher I've had, which isn't saying much since he's basically the only one, but I'd say it anyway." He looked at Draco directly. "He's a good person. If you were going to say something about him, I'd rather you just didn't." Draco Malfoy looked at him for a long moment with an expression that was performing offense, but underneath was something more like curiosity. He looked like a boy who had been given all his lines in advance and had just met someone who hadn't received the same script. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said finally, which was probably a lie, but it was a lie chosen freely, which was different from a reflexive one. They finished their fittings mostly in silence. When Draco stepped down from his stool and was preparing to leave, he paused. "Slytherin," he said. It was half a statement and half a question. "No idea," Harry said honestly. "You?" "Obviously," Draco said, but he said it with something that was almost a question too. Then he left, robes under his arm, back straight, and Harry watched him go and filed him away as someone worth paying attention to. Outside, Hagrid was eating something from a paper bag and looked up. "Make a friend?" "Not yet," Harry said. "But possibly someone interesting." He consulted his list. Bookshop. Ollivander's was last, as planned, as quiet as the rest of the alley was loud. The smell hit Harry immediately, dust and cedar and something sweet and sharp that had no name. The wand maker came from between the shelves like a thought you'd almost finished, pale eyes bright, measuring tape already moving on its own. "Harry Potter," Ollivander said. He said it differently from everyone else, not with the reverence or the second glance at the scar, but with the interest of someone who has been waiting to see a result. The measuring tape finished and dropped. Ollivander began. The first wand, vine, dragon heartstring, he took back almost before Harry had touched it. The second, the third, the seventh, the 12th. Ollivander's expression didn't change exactly, but it intensified, the way a flame gets brighter when you feed it. Harry tried each wand with the same attentive patience he gave to everything new, not performing frustration, not performing eagerness, just genuinely present with each one, waiting to feel the thing Hagrid had told him about. "Curious," Ollivander said, returning from deeper in the shelves with a box that looked older than the others. "Very curious." "What is?" Harry asked. "The wands that almost work. They want to." Ollivander tilted the box open. "Holly. 11 inches. Phoenix feather core." He looked at Harry over it. The phoenix in question gave only 2 feathers. One went to another wand, many years ago. His pale eyes were very direct. "I wonder." Harry took the wand. The warmth came up his arm like someone had pressed a lamp against his palm, immediate and certain and spreading, and the air in the shop moved, actually moved, not a candle flicker but a current, all the little floating dust motes in the slant light spinning outward from Harry's hand in a quiet whirl. Harry held the wand and looked at it and felt the fit of it the way you feel the rightness of a correct answer, not triumphant, just settled. "That'll do," Harry said. Ollivander was looking at him with those bright, unreadable eyes. "Yes," he said. "It will." He tilted his head. "I remember every wand I've ever sold," Mr. Potter. I remember the wand that gave that feather. I know, Harry said. Hagrid explained it. He looked up from the wand. I'm not afraid of it. Ollivander studied him for a moment. No, he said. I see that. Curious. He began wrapping the box. I wonder which of you will prove the greater. I'm not trying to be greater than anyone, Harry said. He pocketed the wand. The warmth settled into something ambient, present, like carrying a coal in your coat. I'm trying to be good at what I'm doing. Ollivander smiled for the first time. It was a small, precise smile. Yes, he said. That may be the most dangerous approach of all. The 1st of September arrived as 1st of Septembers do, suddenly and entirely, without adequate warning. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 with his trunk and his owl and Hagrid behind him, and he looked at the Hogwarts Express with its red engine and its steam and its crowd of children and parents, and he felt, for the first time in a long while, something that was in the same family as nervous. Not afraid. Just aware of the scale of the next thing. Hagrid put a hand the size of a small table on his shoulder. Right then, Hagrid said. Right then, Harry agreed. Yevi got everything. Yeah, know what you're doing. Yell right. Every week, Harry said. He'd promised this 3 times already and he meant it 3 times. And, if anything, I'll write immediately, Harry said. Or send the owl, she knows the way. He looked up. Hagrid. I'm fine. I know you're fine, Hagrid said, slightly defensive. I know that. I'm just, he cleared his throat. Go on, then. Get on the train. Harry picked up his trunk. Then he turned back, briefly, and Hagrid bent down slightly, and Harry hugged him, properly, both arms around the enormous neck, quick and fierce, and then stepped back and picked up his trunk again and got on the train with his chin up and his shoulders back and didn't look back, because if he looked back he was going to have a feeling that was too large for a railway platform. He found a compartment with 2 people already in it, a boy with red hair and something on his nose that appeared to be an old ink smudge, and a second boy, slight, wide-eyed, holding a toad in both hands with the expression of someone who has recaptured the toad multiple times already this morning. Anyone sitting here? Harry asked. No, said the redhead. I'm Ron. Ron Weasley. Neville Longbottom, said the second boy. The toad made a bid for freedom and Neville caught it without taking his eyes off Harry. That's Trevor. Harry Potter, Harry said, sitting down, putting his trunk up. The paws. The eyes to the forehead. Then Ron said, Blimey, and Neville said, I thought so, and Trevor took advantage of the distraction to escape under the seat. While Neville retrieved the toad, Harry looked at Ron. Ron was looking at him with the direct, uncalculated curiosity of someone who was going to ask something and couldn't decide on the order. What's it like? Ron said. Living with Hagrid? My dad talks about him sometimes. Says he's brilliant, Harry said. He knows everything about creatures. He's a terrible cook except for bread, the bread is extraordinary. He cries at sad books and thinks he's hiding it, but he's not. He considered. He taught me Latin. Ron's eyebrows went up. Why Latin? He says it's the grammar of spells and you should understand the grammar of things. Harry looked out the window as the platform began to move past. Hagrid was still there on the platform, big as a building, waving with the unself-conscious full-arm wave of someone who doesn't mind being seen caring about things. Harry lifted a hand to the glass. He's the best person I know. Ron looked at the receding platform and then back at Harry with a slightly recalibrated expression, like he'd expected something and gotten something adjacent but better. He carried you out of your aunt's house, Ron said. Mum told me. Said it was very, he searched for the word his mother had apparently used, determined. Yeah, Harry said. He was. Hermione Granger found them somewhere around Birmingham, sticking her head into the compartment to ask about a lost toad and staying when she found Neville because she'd already been looking for him. She'd seen the toad twice in the corridor and correctly deduced it was the same one. She sat down across from Harry and looked at him with bright, evaluating eyes, and said, "You're Harry Potter." "I know," Harry said. "I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts, and I've read them too," Harry said. "I'm barely in them. Most of it's about Voldemort." The sharp intake of breath from Ron was reflex. Hermione's reaction was different, a slight widening of the eyes, then a tilted head assessment, like she was updating a file. "You say it," she said. "His name." "He's gone," Harry said. "I was a year old. I don't see the point of being afraid of a name." He looked at her. "Hermione, right? You introduced yourself to Neville outside." "How did you?" "The door was open," Harry said. "I was listening." He smiled. "What subjects are you most looking forward to?" This was, clearly, the correct question to ask Hermione Granger. She sat forward and said, "All of them, honestly, but if I had to choose, charms and transfiguration." The theoretical overlap between the two is completely underdiscussed in the introductory literature. Also astronomy, but I've been doing Muggle astronomy since I was 6 and some of the Hogwarts star charts are quite behind. She paused. "What about you?" "Defense against the dark arts," Harry said. "And care of magical creatures, though that's 3rd year. And I want to see what transfiguration is like with a wand. I've been doing the theory but the practical application is different." "You've been doing the theory?" Ron said, slightly alarmed. "Before school?" "Hagrid has a library," Harry said. "And a lot of opinions about being prepared." "My mom has a lot of opinions about being prepared and she didn't make me read any EWT-level theory," Ron said. Then he seemed to hear his own words and added, "Not that it's bad. It's probably good. I just didn't." "You'll be fine," Harry said. "The theory is mostly reasoning from principles. You already know how to do that, the theory just gives you the vocabulary for it." Ron looked at him for a moment. "You're strange," he said, but he was grinning, and Harry grinned back, because he recognized this, the ease of people who have found something compatible in each other. The Great Hall at night was something that not even Hagrid's descriptions had fully prepared him for. Harry stood with the other first years and looked up at the enchanted ceiling where the stars were out in full force, the kind of sky you got over the loch on clear autumn nights, and felt the wand in his robe pocket humming the way it always hummed in places of dense magic, a low contented warmth. The candles floated. The house tables stretched out to their 4 distinct territories. The professors sat at the high table and watched the first years with varying degrees of interest. Harry looked down the professor's table and found Professor Dumbledore in the center, who gave him the small private nod of someone who had been expecting him with genuine anticipation. He found Professor McGonagall, severe and watchful, who was apparently the head of Gryffindor and the Transfiguration teacher and who was looking at the first years with the expression of someone doing rapid initial assessments. He found a witch who looked both extraordinarily warm and quietly formidable in the same breath, Professor Sprout, he thought, herbology. And at the end of the table, Severus Snape was already looking at him. Harry registered it immediately, that specific quality of a gaze that has been waiting for you, and he looked back. He'd heard about Snape. Hagrid had talked about him, not unkindly, but carefully, with the specific care Hagrid used when he was telling Harry something true and complicated. "He's a hard man," Hagrid had said. "He had a hard life. He cared about your mum when they were young, and things went wrong between them, and I think seeing you, well, it'll be complicated. Be patient with him, but don't let him be unkind to Yen either." Harry had stored this carefully and was looking at Snape now with the results of it. Snape looked like a man braced for impact, dark eyes fixed on Harry's face with an intensity that was looking for something and not entirely wanting to find it. He was pale and severe, and his expression was the controlled blankness of someone who has decided in advance how they're going to feel about something. Harry held his gaze for a moment, steady and neutral. Not challenging. Not deferring. Just present. Then he looked away, because the sorting was starting. The sorting hat, when it finally reached his head, was not brief. He'd heard from Ron, who had heard from his brothers, that it was quick for most people. Under a minute. The hat said something to the table cheered, "Next person." For Harry it went longer. "Well," the hat said in his ear, in a voice like the inside of a very old library. "This is something." Harry waited. "You're not what I expected," it said. "Not unpleased. Thoughtful. Most children from difficult beginnings come to me with something to prove. You're not here to prove anything." "I'm here to learn," Harry said. He wasn't sure if he was speaking or thinking, but it felt like the same thing. "Yes." The hat was moving through him in a way that was genuinely odd, not unpleasant but very thorough, like someone leafing through a book quickly and reading everything anyway. Considerable intelligence. Strategic, but not coldly so. Brave, not performed bravery, the deep-set kind that doesn't know it's brave. Loyal, fiercely so. A pause. Slytherin would serve you well. The ambition is there, though you haven't let it become hunger. Ravenclaw would give you what you're looking for in terms of, "Where do I belong?" Harry asked. Not anxiously. Genuinely curious. "That's a better question than most people ask me." The hat seemed pleased. "Usually they tell me where they want to go. You're asking where you actually fit." "I already know where I want to go," Harry said. "I want to go where Hagrid's houses are. Where most of the people he talks about with the most warmth are. I want to be where the people who run toward things are." "Gryffindor, then," the hat said, and it sounded like a smile. "But I want you to remember, boy, the other houses will be watching you. Some of them could have been yours. That matters more than you know." "Gryffindor," the hat announced to the hall. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off, handed it back to Professor McGonagall, who had the look of someone who was very pleased and had decided to show approximately 30% of it, and walked to his table. Ron was already there, seated and beaming. Hermione arrived 2 spots down a few minutes later, sitting with the brightness of someone who'd been hoping for exactly this and had gotten it. Neville made it, pale but smiling, Trevor invisible in his pocket. Harry sat down and looked at the high table. Snape was looking at him again. The expression had changed. It was still controlled, still the careful blank of a man who has decided in advance. But there was a layer underneath it that hadn't been there before, something that looked like it had just been slightly derailed from its intended conclusion. Harry reached for the food that had appeared on the table and listened to Ron explain the Hogwarts house point system with the enthusiastic inaccuracy of someone whose information was entirely second-hand. Potions class was on Thursday morning. They went down to the dungeons in a group, the first-year Gryffindors, and filed into a classroom that was cool and smelled of old stone and complicated chemistry and was lit by the particular flat light of a room that had never had much sun. The Slytherins were already there. Draco Malfoy, at a bench near the middle, caught Harry's eye and gave him a nod that was careful and unreadable. Harry nodded back. Snape entered from a side door. He didn't announce himself. He just walked to the front of the room and stood there, and the noise stopped, not because he called for quiet but because his presence had a quality that silence followed. He was looking at the class with the specific expression of someone who expects to be disappointed and has been proven right enough times to be comfortable with the expectation. Then his eyes found Harry. Harry was seated in the second row, next to Ron, quill out, notebook open, not the standard one-sided parchment most students had prepared, an actual notebook, the lined muggle kind that Hagrid had got him into the habit of, saying it was easier to organize thoughts in. Snape's eyes went to it for just a fraction of a second. Then back to Harry's face. "You are here," Snape said to the class, because the ministry requires you to be. Whether that produces anything of value depends entirely on what you bring to this room. He turned, slowly, to face the whole class. Potions is not wand-waving. It is not dramatic. It is precise, patient, and methodical, and if you are none of those things, you will waste my time, which I will not permit. His gaze completed its circuit of the room. To that end, he began asking questions. Not conversationally, rapidly, clinically, with the manner of someone tightening bolts. The purpose was obvious: establish the floor of knowledge in the room, identify who had read and who hadn't, confirm the expectation of disappointment. Longbottom. Neville jumped. What is the function of bezoar in antidotes? It neutralizes, Neville began. It absorbs poison, Harry said, not loudly, not performing, just the way you correct a friend who has the right idea and the wrong word. Specifically by acting as a receptor for the active toxic compounds before they can bind to tissue. Neville's right about the direction, just the mechanism is absorption rather than neutralization. He looked at Neville. You knew the principle, you just used the wrong word. Neville looked marginally less terrified. The room was very quiet. Snape was looking at Harry with an expression that had abandoned its prepared blankness entirely. He hadn't been expecting to be interrupted. He hadn't been expecting to be corrected. He especially hadn't been expecting to be corrected in a way that simultaneously defended a classmate, and the expression on his face moved through several things very quickly: surprise, something sharp, something else that he pulled back before it was identifiable. You didn't raise your hand, Mr. Potter, he said. I know, Harry said. I was faster without raising it. Several people held their breath. This was clearly the moment. The students around Harry were clearly expecting the moment, the detonation of Snape's considerable arsenal of academic cruelty directed at the boy who'd been impudent. Snape looked at him for a long, calibrating moment. Correct, he said. He said it like the word cost him something and he was paying it anyway. The mechanism is absorption. 5 points to Gryffindor. He turned back to his board. Weasley. Monkshood. Ron, who had been braced for impact, blinked and then answered about monkshood with considerably more confidence than he'd have had 30 seconds earlier. After class, in the corridor, Ron said, You interrupted Snape. He was being harsh to Neville, Harry said. He's always harsh. He's always harsh to everyone, it's how it is. That doesn't mean it should be, Harry said. He wasn't indignant about it, just clear. Neville knew the answer. He just got nervous because Snape was trying to make him get it wrong. That's not teaching. Hermione was looking at him. You're going to have a complicated year with Snape, she said. Probably, Harry agreed. But that's his doing more than mine. He paused. He's not a bad teacher. He's actually quite good. He just doesn't have to use people's nerves against them to be good. Hermione looked at him for another moment. Did Hagrid tell you about him? A bit. What did he say? Harry thought about it. That he's a hard man who had a hard life. That I should be patient but not let him be unkind. He started walking. I'm doing both. The weeks accumulated. The rhythms of Hogwarts established themselves, and Harry moved through them with the easy forward momentum of someone who arrived with enough preparation to not be overwhelmed but enough genuine curiosity to never be bored. Transfiguration he took to immediately. Professor McGonagall, who was not one for enthusiasm, gave him the equivalent of a standing ovation on the third class when he produced a clean, complete transformation with 3 fewer incantations than the standard method, and her actual response was to say adequate with an expression that meant extraordinary and assign him additional reading, which he received as the compliment it was. Charms was a joy. Professor Flitwick, who fell off his stack of books during Harry's demonstration of the Wingardium Leviosa charm, did so with an expression of pure pleasure. Defense against the dark arts was complicated. Professor Quirrell was nervous in a particular way that Harry noticed on the first day, not the nervousness of a new teacher or a shy person, but something that moved differently, something that sat wrong in the room the way a sound sits wrong when it's in the wrong key. He had a stutter that came and went, which people mostly took at face value. Harry noted when it came and when it went. He didn't say anything about it. He stored it. He wrote to Hagrid every week as promised. The letters were long and detailed, and Hagrid's replies were longer and less detail-organized but warmer, and Harry kept them in a stack in his trunk that was growing with a speed that pleased him. Hagrid asked about the creatures in the Forbidden Forest. He asked about the subjects and the food and whether Harry had learned to like porridge yet. He asked about the friends, and Harry's answers got longer and more specific each week. Ron was easy in the way of someone you could argue with freely and neither of you would mind. He was strategically excellent, his chess game was revelatory, and Harry had started applying Ron's instinct for board-state reading to situations outside of chess, which Ron found embarrassing and accurate. He was funny and loyal and occasionally frustrated by Harry's refusal to be appropriately impressed by things that the wizarding world considered impressive, but he was also, underneath that, privately pleased by it, because it meant Harry was impressed by him specifically rather than by the accumulated glamour of the boy who lives attention. Hermione was complicated in the best way. She was the fastest thinker Harry had met outside of Dumbledore, and she had a relationship to rules that was less about obedience and more about having read them all and knowing exactly which ones mattered. She and Harry had argued twice before October, and both arguments had ended in the comfortable silence of two people who'd found the edges of each other's thinking and were pleased with the map. She asked questions the way Harry did: why, and what follows from that, and what do you do with the answer? They were going to be fine. Neville was a surprise. He was frightened of everything and then, occasionally, not frightened of anything. Harry had watched him stand in the doorway of the greenhouses on the first herbology lesson and go from terrified to completely fluent in the time it took to reach his workbench, as though his fear was contextual, some rooms making it larger and some making it small. Harry had told him this and Neville had blinked and said, "Really?" And Harry had said, "Watch yourself in here. This is what you look like when you're not afraid." He'd watched Neville think about that for 3 days and then do something with it. The last week of October brought the troll. It was at Halloween, during the feast, when Professor Quirrell came in and announced that there was a troll in the dungeons, and his voice broke on the word troll with his particular irregular stutter, and then he fainted. The great hall erupted. Dumbledore called for order and sent the students to their houses. Harry found Hermione at the end of the third-floor corridor, not because she was lost but because she'd gone to check something in the library before the feast and been caught in the wrong place when the announcement came, and she was walking back to Gryffindor with her books and a slightly narrowed expression when Harry and Ron found her. "Dungeons," Harry said, falling into step. "Not the dungeon bathrooms." Hermione looked at him. "I know. I heard the same announcement you did." The troll went toward the trophy room, Ron said, breathing hard from running. "We heard it, the boys' bathroom's near there." It was massive. "Girls' bathroom on this floor," Hermione said. "I looked in on the way past. I needed to verify it wasn't going there because," she stopped. "Because you were worried about Parvati," Harry finished. "She always uses that bathroom before the feast." Hermione blinked. "How did you know that?" "I notice things," Harry said. "She's not there, she went with the others." "Come on." They heard the troll 3 corridors before they saw it. The noise of it, the rumbling, shuffling bulk of something that size moving without any interest in what it destroyed, and then the smell, which was like the inside of a long unopened drain. Harry moved ahead of the other 2 and turned the corner. The troll was in the corridor. It was bigger than the descriptions. 12 feet was what Hagrid had said, which was accurate, but the books hadn't conveyed the specific quality of its indifference to everything around it, the way it moved through the world the way weather does, not malicious, just large and heedless. It was facing away from them, examining a stone gargoyle with the detached interest of something encountering an obstacle. Alohomora on the door to the left, Harry said quietly. "Get in and stay in." "We're leaving," Ron said. "You are," Harry said. He had his wand out. "I'm going to move it toward the stairs." "By yourself?" Hermione said, not afraid exactly, but very intent. "Harry, Hagrid has a 12-foot troll in his care of magical creatures notes," Harry said. He was watching the troll carefully, reading its movement the same way he'd learned to read anything large and unpredictable. Chapter 3. They're not intelligent but they're stimulus responsive. You bother them from one direction, they move away from it. He glanced back. "I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to annoy it toward the stairs and then let the professors deal with it. Go." Hermione started to say something, stopped, opened the door with a quick Alohomora, and she and Ron went in. Harry looked back at the troll. He aimed at the stone gargoyle above its head and said "Depulso" cleanly, and the gargoyle shot off the wall and hit the opposite corridor with a crack like a small explosion. The troll turned around. It saw Harry. Harry stood in the corridor looking up at a 12-foot troll with his wand at his side and the calm of someone who has decided that being frightened of this would be a poor use of energy. He had about 30 feet of corridor between them and a very clear mental map of where the stairs were. "Right then," he said. "Come on." He turned and ran, and the troll came after him with the enthusiasm of something that has found its objective, and Harry ran it directly toward the stairs where he could already hear the thundering approach of 4 professors from the floor above, and when the professors turned the corner and found the troll charging toward them it was, as Harry had calculated, very much their problem to deal with. He slid through a side door, let it shut behind him, and stood in the dark of an empty classroom and listened to the commotion in the corridor. His heart was beating hard and he was grinning in the dark at nothing, at the specific feeling of something going exactly where he'd aimed it. The door opened. Hermione and Ron had not, apparently, stayed in the room. "You told us to stay in the room," Hermione said. "I did," Harry agreed. "We didn't," Ron said, slightly out of breath. "I know," Harry said. "Thank you." The 3 of them stood in the dark classroom while the troll was subdued by 4 professors in the corridor outside, and Ron was grinning the way he grinned when a chess move worked, and Hermione was looking at Harry with an expression that had fully finished its update of his file and was ready for whatever came next. "So," she said. "Still think Quirrell's guilty of something?" Harry looked at the door. "I think he let the troll in," he said. "I think it was a distraction. I think whatever it was meant to distract people from is on the 3rd-floor corridor, the one that's forbidden." Silence. "You've thought about this a while," Ron said. "Since the first week of school," Harry said. He turned away from the door. "Come on. Let's go back to the tower before they count heads." Chapter 4. The Mirror and the Stone. November came in hard off the mountains, the kind of cold that had opinions about it, and Hogwarts shifted into its winter register, fires burning in every hearth, the staircases drafty in new and creative ways, the lake going dark and still under a sky that couldn't hold color past 3 in the afternoon. Harry liked it. There was something honest about weather that committed to itself. He was on the 3rd-floor corridor on a Thursday evening in the 2nd week of November, which he was technically not supposed to be, but the prohibition had always struck him as the kind that existed to keep the incurious out rather than the careful in. He wasn't here to do anything. He was here to look. The door at the end of the corridor was locked. Not just locked, he could feel the layering of enchantments on it the way you feel different temperatures in a swimming pool, distinct and deliberate, one over another. He stood in front of it with his wand in his pocket, making no move to open it, and catalogued what he could sense. Alohomora wouldn't touch the outer layer. There was something keyed to magical signatures beneath it. Beneath that, something mechanical. And beneath that, something warm. Something that felt almost like his wand. Like the quality of it, the specific resonance. He stood there for a while, just reading it. Then he turned and went back down the corridor and noted in his Muggle notebook, the 3rd one this term, what he'd found. Ron was asleep when Harry got back to the dormitory. Neville was reading with a lumos going, which he extinguished guiltily when Harry came in. "I wasn't sleeping," Neville said. "I know," Harry said. He sat on his bed. "Neville. If something were hidden behind a door on the third floor that multiple professors had warded, what do you think it was?" Neville put his book down. He'd been doing this increasingly, arriving fully at a question rather than hedging around it, as though Harry's habit of treating him like a thinking person was gradually being confirmed as a reasonable approach. "Something valuable," he said. "Or something dangerous." "Or both," Harry said. "The forbidden corridor," Neville said. "Not a question. You've thought about it too." "I've thought about not thinking about it," Neville said, which was honest. "What's behind it?" "I don't know yet," Harry said. "But whatever it is, Quirrell knows about it. And I think he wants it." Neville was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" Harry lay back on his bed and looked at the canopy. "Figure out what it is first," he said. "Then figure out whether anyone's going to deal with it, or whether we have to." "We," Neville said. He seemed to turn this over. "You mean you and Ron and Hermione?" "I mean whoever's useful," Harry said. He turned his head to look at Neville. "That might include you." Neville looked at him for a long moment in the dim light. He seemed to be doing the same calculation Harry had watched him do in herbology, measuring the size of his fear against the size of himself, finding the ratio unfavorable, and then arriving somewhere different anyway. "Okay," he said. He picked his book back up. "Tell me when you need me." The library was where the three of them thought best. Hermione because she was most efficient there and had already built a mental map of every section. Ron because the library was the one place where he didn't feel the pressure to be immediately good at something, since everyone was equally uncertain in a library. Harry because the smell of it reminded him of Hagrid's cottage, which reminded him of somewhere safe, and safe was a useful state for thinking. They had a table in the back, past restricted section, where the serious students came and the casual ones didn't bother. It was their table in the way things become yours through consistent occupation. "Nicholas Flamel," Hermione said. She put a large book down on the table with the satisfaction of someone who has been looking for a thing and found it. "I knew I'd seen the name." Harry looked. Ron leaned over. "Nicholas Flamel. Noted alchemist. 665 years old. Creator of the only known philosopher's stone." Harry read it twice. "The stone," he said. "That's what it is. That's what's behind the door." "The philosopher's stone makes the elixir of life," Hermione said, running her finger down the entry. "Grants immortality. Turns any metal to gold. It's the only one in existence." She looked up. "Dumbledore moved it from Gringotts. There was a break-in attempt last summer, before term started. Someone tried to steal it from Gringotts," Ron said slowly. "And then someone tried to steal it at Hogwarts on Halloween," Harry finished. "With a troll as a distraction." He leaned back. "Quirrell broke into Gringotts. Then when it didn't work he followed it here." "You can't know it was Quirrell," Hermione said, with the tone of someone who suspected it was Quirrell. "He let the troll in," Harry said. "The route it took, someone opened doors for it. And the same night, someone attempted to get past the third-floor corridor. Professor Snape was there. I saw his robes were torn when he came into the Great Hall after." He paused. "Snape was trying to stop whoever it was, not help them." Ron stared at him. "You've been doing this all term." "I noticed things," Harry said. "I wrote them down." Hermione looked at the notebook. Harry pushed it across the table to her. She read it with focused speed, turning pages, and her expression moved from evaluating to impressed to something that was quietly concerned. "You've got Quirrell connected to 6 incidents," she said. 7, Harry said. I added the staircase thing last night. He was on the 7th floor the night after the troll, at 2 in the morning. I saw him in the Marauder, I saw him in a map of the castle I found. He'd almost said the Marauder's map, which had come to him under circumstances he hadn't fully explained to anyone, a folded piece of parchment that had fallen out of an old Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook in a way that felt less like accident and more like intention. He was near the 3rd floor corridor again. He went to the door and stood there for 20 minutes and then left. He's circling it, Ron said. He can't get through, Harry said. Not yet. Whatever's blocking him, it's blocking him. But he's trying. And at some point he'll either find a way or someone will give him one, Hermione said. She closed the notebook. Harry. If Quirrell gets the stone and Voldemort, she said the name carefully, with the deliberate practice of someone who decided to say it after watching Harry say it without consequence. If Voldemort comes back, he doesn't have a body, Harry said. Quirrell does. Something's using Quirrell, I think. Using him as a way into the world. He looked at them. That's what Quirrell is so afraid of, all the time. It's not his nature. It's something on him. He paused. Something that lives with him. The library was very quiet around them. That's terrifying, Ron said. Yes, Harry agreed. He gathered his notebook. That's why we need to figure out what's between that door and the stone and how it works, so that when we have to act we know what we're doing. When we have to act, Hermione echoed. When, Harry said. Not if. The mirror appeared the week before Christmas. Most of the students had gone home for the holidays. The castle went quiet in the way large spaces go quiet, not empty but differently populated. The echoes changed and the routines loosened. Harry stayed, and Ron stayed because Harry was staying, and Hermione went home but left Harry a stack of reference books with annotated page markers, which was perhaps the most Hermione gesture in a term full of them. Harry explored. He explored in the way he'd explored everything in his life, systematically but not rigidly, following interesting threads, noting what he found. He found 3 rooms that weren't on any map he'd seen and appeared to exist only on certain nights. He found a portrait who claimed to have been a ministry spy in the 1700s and whose information, while dated, was structurally useful. He found a staircase that went nowhere but went there very pleasantly, with a window at the landing that looked out over the snow-covered grounds and the lock going pewter in the December light. He found the mirror on a Tuesday night in an unused classroom on the 4th floor, just sitting there against the wall under a dusty cloth, which seemed like a casual way to store something that announced itself, on its frame, as, Erist stra eru oit ube kafru oit on wosi. Harry worked it out in about 30 seconds, because Hagrid had given him puzzles like this since he was 8 years old, reverse text embedded in apparent gibberish. I show not your face but your heart's desire. He looked at it for a moment. Then he pulled the cloth off. The mirror was tall, reaching the ceiling, with an ornate golden frame. The surface was different from a regular mirror, not quite reflective, deeper than reflective, the way a lake is different from a pool of standing water. Harry stood in front of it and looked at himself and waited to see what he saw. It took a second. Then the image shifted and filled and settled, and Harry stood very still and looked at what the mirror showed him. He saw Hagrid first. Hagrid enormous and alive and laughing at something, the specific full-body laugh that shook the furniture. And next to him, 2 people Harry had never seen in a mirror before, a woman with green eyes exactly like his and dark hair and an expression that was familiar in the way your own face is familiar. A man with glasses and untidy hair and an easy grin. His mother. His father. They were all laughing at something. Harry couldn't hear it, but he could read it, Hagrid saying something ridiculous, his father responding, his mother's eyes bright with it. A table with food on it. A cottage that was Hagrid's but larger somehow, warmer. All of them together. Harry looked at this for a long moment. He didn't cry. He stood there and let himself see it fully, and he felt the specific shape of the grief in it, the loss that was real and present and would not go away, and he also felt something else, something that was neither grief nor comfort exactly but existed alongside both. He had that laugh. Hagrid's laugh. He saw it every week, every morning over breakfast, every evening over whatever book they were arguing about. He had the table. He had the cottage. He had most of it, and the part he didn't have, the two people in the image, couldn't be had. He put the cloth back. He stood in the corridor outside the classroom for a moment. Then he wrote in his notebook, "Mirror of Ariste, 4th floor, classroom 14B. Shows the viewer's deepest desire. Addictive. People can lose themselves in it. Move it or report it to Dumbledore." Then, below that, in slightly different handwriting, as though it had been added after a pause, "I saw them. It was good to see them. I don't need to go back." He reported it to Dumbledore the next morning. Dumbledore was in his office in the way he was always in his office, seemingly as though he'd been there for some time and had been expecting this particular visit. The portraits on the walls dozed or pretended to. Fawkes regarded Harry from his perch with orange-bright eyes and the specifically intelligent attention of a creature that had been around long enough to recognize significance when it arrived. "You found the mirror," Dumbledore said. "Tuesday night," Harry said, sitting down. "I covered it again. I thought about moving it, but I figured if I moved it and something broke I'd rather you knew first." "Very sensible," Dumbledore said. He looked at Harry over his half-moon glasses with that particular quality of attention he brought to their conversations, genuinely listening rather than receiving. "And what did you see?" "My family," Harry said. "Hagrid and my parents. All together." He paused. "Hagrid was telling a joke and my father was laughing." "Ah," Dumbledore said softly. "I went once," Harry said. "I looked at it properly, and then I left." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "Most people cannot do that," he said. "The mirror has held men in front of it for days. Weeks." "I know," Harry said. "I read the frame. I understood what it was." He looked at Fawkes for a moment, then back at Dumbledore. "It would have been easy to go back. That's how easy things work, isn't it? They're easy until they're a trap." He paused. "I don't want a mirror. I want the actual things. The ones I can have, I have. The ones I can't." He stopped. Dumbledore was looking at him with an expression that had set aside all its layers. "Just looking. You know," Harry said, "you could have told me about the stone." The expression didn't change, but something in Dumbledore went very still. "We know it's here," Harry said. "We figured it out from the Flamel reference in November. Gringotts break-in last summer, moved here, protected behind the corridor. And Quirrell's trying to get to it." He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "I'm not asking for confirmation. I'm telling you that we know, and that whatever Quirrell is, whatever is riding around in Quirrell, it's getting closer to finding a way through." A long silence. The fire crackled. Fawkes made a low sound. "How did you identify Quirrell?" Dumbledore asked. "His stutter disappears when he's not paying attention to it," Harry said. "Someone who stutters from a neurological cause doesn't get to turn it off when distracted, distraction makes it worse. His stutter is a performance. Also his hands don't shake when he's performing competence, only when he's performing nervousness. And he smells wrong. I noticed it on the first day and I finally placed it in October. There's a component in the smell that's in Hagrid's dark creature reference texts. It's associated with possession." Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. "I have been watching him also," he said finally. "I know," Harry said. "But you've been watching him from a distance. I'm in his classroom twice a week." Harry looked at him. "Professor Dumbledore. If Quirrell gets the stone and Voldemort uses it to return, what happens?" The name in this office, in this conversation, landed differently than it did in the school corridors. Dumbledore absorbed it. Considerable suffering, Dumbledore said. A war, almost certainly. He looked at Harry. And a prophecy that would require you to be at the center of it. The prophecy, Harry said. He'd known it existed, Hagrid had said, when you're older, and older had been gradually arriving for 3 years now. Tell me. Another silence. Fawkes rustled. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, Dumbledore said, quietly. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The office was very quiet. Harry turned this over. He read it the way he'd read everything Hagrid had ever taught him, as a primary source that contained what it contained and no more, and the interpretations people put on top of it were a separate matter entirely. Power the Dark Lord knows not, Harry said. What do you think that means? Love, Dumbledore said. Your mother's sacrifice. The protection it created. Maybe, Harry said. Or maybe the prophecy's referring to something that hasn't developed yet. Something that comes from being, from growing up the way I grew up, rather than the way you originally intended. He looked at Dumbledore directly. I'm not saying that to blame you. I'm saying it because I think it matters. Dumbledore looked at him for a long, considering moment. You are rather alarming sometimes, Harry, he said. It was a compliment. Hagrid says that too, Harry said. He sounds more pleased about it. Dumbledore smiled. Then the smile settled into something more serious. The protection around the stone is considerable. Voldemort, or Quirrell, as his vessel, would need to solve several successive magical challenges to reach it. Each challenge was designed by a different professor. The final protection, he stopped. Is the mirror, Harry said. The smallest pause. Yes. The stone was placed inside the mirror. Only someone who wanted to find the stone but not use it would be able to retrieve it from the mirror's image. He looked at Harry. And someone like Quirrell, who desires above all things to use it for his master, would see himself using it but never feel it in his pocket. That's brilliant, Harry said. He meant it. It was a reasonable plan, Dumbledore said. For someone who came to it through the mirror in the ordinary way. He was looking at Harry steadily. It did not fully account for someone who already understood the mirror and could approach it deliberately rather than naturally. A long pause. You're telling me, Harry said slowly, that if someone who wanted to find the stone without using it, purely to protect it, stood in front of the mirror, they'd see themselves with it in their pocket. Yes, Dumbledore said. And then they'd actually have it. Yes. Harry looked at the fire. He looked at it for a while. If Quirrell gets past the other protections, he said, he'd still be stopped by the mirror. Unless he found someone to stand in front of it for him. Someone who could get it out, and who he could then take it from. He looked up at Dumbledore. Does Quirrell know how it works? Voldemort may, Dumbledore said carefully. Then the plan is to find the right person, Harry said. A child, maybe. Someone who wouldn't realize what they were doing. Or someone he can control. He filed this carefully. That changes the timeline. He's not just waiting to get through the door, he's been looking for a tool. I had reached a similar conclusion, Dumbledore said. Good, Harry said. He stood up. I'll keep watching Quirrell. He paused at the door. Professor Dumbledore. Thank you for telling me about the prophecy. You asked directly, Dumbledore said. I decided, some time ago, that I would stop deciding things for you. He looked at Harry over his half-moon glasses with something that was deep and old and genuine. It seems to be working out better for everyone. Christmas Day at Hogwarts was quiet and snow-laden and fine. Harry received a package from Hagrid that contained a hand-knitted jumper in Gryffindor red, 3 books, a jar of something that claimed to be marmalade but was definitely also enchanted, and a letter 6 pages long that was mostly about the hippogriff currently in the paddock and its opinions about everything. Harry read it at breakfast in the near-empty Great Hall and wrote back immediately, 3 pages, and sent it with his owl before the morning was over. There was a second package he hadn't expected. Brown paper, no note, left at the foot of his bed. He opened it and found an invisibility cloak, silver grey and immaterial as smoke between his fingers. Underneath it, on a small card, in handwriting he recognized from the custody order, from the letters, from the comm of Dumbledore's office, "Your father left this in my keeping. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas." Harry held the cloak for a moment. He thought about the image in the mirror, his father's easy grin. He thought about a man leaving something in Dumbledore's keeping and never coming back for it. He folded the cloak carefully and put it in his trunk, and then he took it back out, because it was too useful for the trunk right now, and put it in his robe pocket where it weighed almost nothing, and went to find Ron for chess. After Christmas, things moved faster. Quirrell was changing. Harry noticed it first in January. The quality of his fear in the classroom had shifted from ambient to directional, as though whatever he was afraid of was now behind him rather than all around him, and behind fear was different from everywhere fear because it meant you'd committed to moving towards something. He was thinner. The turban was worn slightly differently, higher, tighter, as though it had acquired importance. Harry wrote to Hagrid. He wrote carefully, not fully committing to the thing he suspected, but Hagrid's response came back in 2 days with the specific velocity of someone who had been worried. "I know you're being careful and I know you're right to be. But Harry, tell Dumbledore everything you know, including the things you think he already knows. Don't assume he's got all of it. And don't try to handle whatever's behind that door on your own. Promise me." Harry wrote back, "I promise. But if it happens and there's no one else, then I will." He sent it before he could talk himself out of the honesty. Hagrid's next letter contained 2 words, "I know." Then, "Be careful. Be brilliant." They're not opposites. In defense class in late January, Quirrell set them a practical exercise, simple shielding charms, the kind you practiced in pairs while he moved around the room and corrected form. Harry was paired with Ron. They ran through it several times, and then Quirrell came to stand behind Harry to assess his technique, and Harry felt it. It was cold. Not the classroom's cold, not the draft from the windows, something else, something that came off Quirrell in a directional wave that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with presence. The presence of something that had no business being near Harry. Harry felt his wand hand go very warm in response, instinctive, the same warmth from Ollivander's shop, and Quirrell stepped back very abruptly. Harry turned around. Quirrell was looking at him. The stutter was entirely absent. His eyes, for just a second, were not exactly his own. There was a quality behind them, a depth that belonged to something with considerably more years in it than a nervous defense teacher. Harry looked back at it without flinching and without dropping his gaze. The moment lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then Quirrell blinked and his stutter returned and he moved on to the next pair of students, and the temperature in that part of the room went back to normal, and Harry turned to face Ron and said, quietly, "Keep practicing. Don't look back." Ron's jaw was tight. "That was, I know," Harry said. "Keep practicing." After class, in the corridor, Ron said, "It looked at you." "Yes," Harry said. "And you looked back." "Yes." "Most people," Ron said, "would have been." "I know," Harry said. "But being afraid of it isn't going to be useful, and being useful is what matters right now." He looked down the corridor toward the stairs. Whatever's in Quirrell has been in Quirrell for months. It knows the castle. It's tried the door repeatedly. And now it knows I know. Ron was very still. "Does that change things?" "It means it might try something before it's ready," Harry said. "Which is actually better than it trying something when it is ready." He started walking. Come on. I've got Transfiguration in 10 minutes and I want to talk to Hermione before it starts. Snape found Harry in the library that evening. Harry was alone, Hermione was in the common room, Ron was at chess with Neville, and he was writing in his notebook when the chair across from him was pulled back and Snape sat down with the air of someone who had located a thing and was not in the mood to approach it indirectly. Harry looked up. He waited. You've been investigating the third-floor corridor, Snape said. Not an accusation. A statement of known fact. I've been investigating what's behind it, Harry said. Those are not authorized student activities. I know, Harry said. He looked at Snape steadily. Professor Snape. You were injured on Halloween. You were on the staircase between the corridor and the lower floors. You've been at the door on at least 4 nights this term. Snape looked at him with the precise expression of someone recalibrating how much this person knows. It had happened before, in potions, when Harry had corrected the Bezoar answer, and it happened the same way now, the controlled blank shifting under pressure. You've been protecting it, Harry said. The stone. You've been trying to make sure whatever's after it doesn't get through. You are 11 years old, Snape said. I know, Harry said. It keeps being relevant to people. It's not relevant to the stone. Silence. Quirrell, Harry said. Something is in Quirrell. I felt it today in defense. It was cold in a specific way, not temperature. The way cold feels when it's opposite something warm. He glanced at his wand. My wand ran warm when it was near me. I think, whatever Quirrell is carrying, I think it knows my wand. I think they've been connected before. Snape looked at Harry for a long, unreadable moment. His expression was doing something layered and complicated, the way it did when Harry said something that landed in a private place. Your mother, Snape said, very carefully, was one of the finest witches of her generation. Harry looked at him. He felt the weight of how much was packed into that sentence. I know, Harry said, gently. Hagrid told me about her. She sounds extraordinary. Something moved across Snape's face. Very fast, but visible, because Harry was paying attention. She was, he said. They sat in the library in silence for a moment, the two of them, and it was a different kind of silence from any they'd had before. If whatever is in Quirrell makes its move, Harry said, and someone needs to go through those defenses, you should know I understand most of them. I've been reading about the professors who designed them. I know Flitwick's work and McGonagall's. Yours, he paused. Logic puzzle, I think. Potions. 11 bottles. Snape looked at him. I'm good at potions, Harry said. Not because I work at it. Because you're an excellent teacher. The silence that followed this was very long. Snape was not, as far as Harry could tell, a man who received genuine compliments without his entire defensive architecture trying to reject them, and he watched this process happen in real time on Snape's face, the deflection forming, being considered, being set aside. Don't be insufferable about it, Snape said. I won't, Harry said. Snape stood. He stood with the controlled economy of movement he brought to everything, and he paused at the end of the table, and he said, with his back to Harry, I am aware of the state of things behind that door. I am also aware that Quirrell is, compromised, in ways that make direct confrontation counterproductive. Dumbledore is monitoring the situation. I know, Harry said. Then you know, Snape said, that the situation may resolve itself without intervention from an 11-year-old. It might, Harry said. But I'm the one Voldemort marked, Professor. If it comes to someone going through that door, whoever goes has the best chance if they understand what they're walking into. He looked at Snape's back. I understand what I'm walking into. Just in case. A long pause. The potions puzzle, Snape said, still without turning. The key is the smallest bottle, which is also the coldest. The cold indicates the presence of a passage-forward enchantment. He paused. In case. He left without looking back, robes moving behind him, and Harry watched him go and turn back to his notebook and wrote, very precisely, smallest bottle, coldest, passage forward, and underlined it twice. Outside the library windows, the snow was falling on the Hogwarts grounds in the dark, and the lock was invisible below the cloud, and in the castle somewhere, Quirrell paced and wore his turban and carried his cold, patient, burning weight through the corridors, and Harry sat in the library light and felt his wand warm in his pocket and thought, soon. Chapter 5. The trapdoor. The letter from Hagrid arrived on a Tuesday in late May, and it was not the usual kind. The usual letters were long and warm and slightly ink-smudged in the places where Hagrid's hand had moved before the ink dried, full of creature news and cooking experiments and opinions about things Harry had written to him about. This one was 3 lines. Harry read it at breakfast and read it again. Harry. Someone's been asking me questions about the defenses on the 3rd floor. Asking about what's inside and how it works. I might have said something I shouldn't. Come and see me when you can. Harry folded it, put it in his pocket, looked at Ron and Hermione across the table. Hagrid, he said. They both put down their forks. The gamekeeper's cottage was warm and smelled of something baking, and Fong was overjoyed and enormous about the whole visit, and Hagrid was at the table with his hands wrapped around a mug and the expression of a man who has done something and has been sitting with it long enough to understand exactly what he's done. Tell me, Harry said. He sat down. Ron and Hermione took the bench along the wall. Hagrid looked at all 3 of them and then looked at his mug. Someone came by last month, he said. Cloaked, didn't give a name. Asked about Fluffy. Fluffy, Harry said. The 3-headed dog, Hagrid said. He had the grace to look pained. I keep him on the 3rd floor. He's guarding the trapdoor. I bred him, I know how he works. He stopped. The person asked how get past a Cerberus. I said music. Music puts him to sleep. I said it before I thought about why they were asking. He put down his mug with a heavy click. Stupid. You weren't stupid, Harry said immediately. You were being yourself. Talking about creatures is what you do. Someone used that against you. Still said it. What did this person look like? Harry asked. Couldn't see properly. Robes up. But the voice, Hagrid frowned. Couldn't place it. But there was something off about it. A quality I didn't like. He looked at Harry. You know what I'm going to say. Quirrell, Harry said. Hagrid nodded heavily. I think it was him. Or something using him. Harry looked at the fire. The timeline was collapsing towards something, and he could feel it the way you feel weather coming, not yet, but close, and the shape of it was already visible. He thought about what Dumbledore had said about the mirror, about Voldemort understanding how it worked. He thought about Quirrell, thinner every week, more directional in his fear. He thought about Snape outside the library, soon. It's going to be soon, Harry said. Tonight, possibly. Or the next few days. He has the music, he knows the route, he's been watching the door for months. He looked at Hagrid. Is Dumbledore here? Hagrid's expression changed. He was called away this morning. An owl from the ministry. Emergency. He left this morning at 7. The room was very still. That's convenient, Ron said flatly. Very, Harry said. He looked at Hermione. She was already 3 steps ahead, he could see it in her face, the same place he was. He arranged it, Hermione said. Someone sent a false ministry summons. Dumbledore's gone and there's no one else who knows enough about all the defenses to, she stopped herself. We have to go tonight. Hold on, Hagrid said, and he sat forward and his voice came out with a particular quality that Harry recognized, not shouting, not demanding, but carrying the full weight of what he was. "I'm not sendin' ya in there." "You're not sending us," Harry said. "We're going." He looked at Hagrid directly. "Hagrid. You know what's in there. You know what happens if Quirrell gets the stone." "I know," Hagrid said. "That doesn't mean it should be you who stops it." "It does, actually," Harry said. "Not just because of the prophecy. Because I know what all the defenses are. I know how they work. I've spent 6 months learning it." He paused. "Also, I can get the stone out of the mirror, because I don't want to use it, and Quirrell can't get it out because he does. That's the whole point of the final defense." Hagrid put his face in his hands. "I'm not going to get hurt," Harry said. "I'm going prepared." "Famous last words," Hagrid said, muffled. "I mean it. I know every challenge in there. I've gone over it with enough information that the only unknown is Quirrell himself, and," Harry paused. "I've faced him before. I know what he is. I'm not afraid of him." Hagrid lifted his face. His eyes were red. "I know you're not afraid of him," he said. "That's not always the part that worries me." He looked at Harry with the specific, enormous love of someone who has been worrying about someone since before they were large enough to worry back. "You're 11 years old." "I know," Harry said. "You can keep reminding me. It doesn't change what has to be done." A long silence. Fong put his head on Hagrid's knee. "Send a Patronus to Professor McGonagall," Hermione said to Hagrid. Her voice was calm and practical, which was its own kind of courage. "Tell her what's happening. She may not make it in time, but she should know." She looked at Harry. "And you're going to send your owl to Dumbledore directly?" "He's on a fake ministry errand," Ron said. "He'll realize quickly. He'll come back. He still needs to know the specific situation so he knows where to go when he does," Hermione said. "Harry. Write the owl now. Short, specific, everything." Harry was already moving. He borrowed Hagrid's quill and wrote the owl in 2 minutes flat on the back of an old feed order, folded it, and handed it to Hedwig, who had come down from her perch with the focused attention of a post owl who could tell she was being handed something important. "Fast as you can," he said. Hedwig gave him a look that communicated, precisely, that she was always fast and he was welcome, and was out the window in 4 beats of her wings. Hagrid was still sitting with his hands around his mug and his expression heavy with the specific misery of a man who has learned that love sometimes means letting people go toward dangerous things. "I'll be right behind ya," he said. "Soon as I've sent McGonagall." "You're not small enough for the corridor," Harry said. "I'll stand outside the trapdoor and I'll be there when ya come back up," Hagrid said, with the flatness of someone stating a non-negotiable. "Don't argue." Harry didn't argue. They went at midnight. The invisibility cloak covered all 3 of them if they pressed close, which they did, moving through the castle corridors with the specific quiet of people who have done this enough times to know which stairs creaked and which Peeves hours to avoid. The castle was dark and enormous and breathing in the slow way old buildings breathe at night, all stone and cool air and the particular solitude of a place where everyone is asleep. 3rd floor corridor. The door. Harry pulled out his wand and went through the enchantments the way he'd catalogued them, 3 layers, the outer 2 yielding to a specific sequence he'd worked out over 3 months of careful observation, the 3rd to a key charm that he'd found in the defense texts and which was, as he'd suspected, Flitwick's work. The door opened. Inside was warmth and the smell of animal and a low rumbling that resonated in the chest before the ears caught it. Harry held the cloak around them and they stood just inside the door and let their eyes adjust. Fluffy was asleep. All 3 heads, the enormous 3-headed mass of him, curled on the trapdoor with each set of jaws slightly open and the deep, even breathing of a creature that had been played to sleep not long ago. On the floor near the nearest head, a small music box, still running down, the last notes thinning to silence as they watched. "He's already here," Hermione breathed. Just got through, Harry said. Recently. He looked at the music box. We need to lift one of his paws to get the trapdoor open and then we jump before he wakes. Jump, Ron said. Into what? Devil's Snare, I think, Hermione said. Sprout's Challenge. I've read about it in herbology. Don't struggle. Don't struggle in the man-eating plant, Ron said. Good. Simple. Fine. Harry wasn't going to argue about being quick. He moved out from under the cloak, crossed to the trapdoor in 8 steps, got his hand under the edge of Fluffy's paw, warm, enormous, with the specific inertness of deep sleep, and lifted it. The trapdoor swung on its own weight. Black below. Go, Harry said. Hermione went first, without hesitation, which Harry thought was one of the most genuinely brave things he'd seen all year. Ron went second with his jaw set and his eyes closed. Harry lowered Fluffy's paw back down, waited 2 seconds for the rumbling not to change pitch, and dropped through. The fall was longer than it felt like it should be, and then the landing was soft, not floor soft but catching soft, cushioning with a purposeful aliveness, and Harry recognized the sensation before his eyes adjusted, fibrous, wrapping, tightening. Devil's Snare, exactly as predicted. He went completely still. Beside him Ron froze. Hermione was already loose, she'd relaxed first, instinctively, and was stepping clear. Light, Harry said. Lumos Solum, Hermione said, and bright daylight quality light bloomed from her wand and the plant flinched back with the speed of something that found sunlight genuinely offensive, and Harry stepped clear, and Ron rolled free making a sound that was partly relief and partly indignation. I hate plants, Ron said, getting up. He patted himself down. Not all plants. That one specifically. It wasn't personal, Hermione said. It had its vines on my face, Ron said. That's personal. Harry was already moving through the next passage. He could feel the warmth of his wand from here, which was directional now in a way it hadn't been in the classroom, pointing, almost, the way a compass needle points, a tug towards something and away from something else. He followed the away. The next chamber had wings. Not birds, keys. Hundreds of them, the winged kind, darting and hovering at ceiling height, and below them a broomstick and a locked door and the scattering light of all those little wings. Harry looked up, read the motion of them with the same instinct he'd developed over a summer of flying over the loch, and picked out the right one, old-fashioned, one wing slightly bent, hiding near the back like it knew it was important. He had the broom off the floor, was airborne, and had the key in hand in under 90 seconds. He landed, unlocked the door, tossed the key to Hermione, who caught it with the slightly startled expression of someone who hadn't realized they were expected to do that. In case we need it on the way back, Harry said. The third chamber. The chess pieces were massive and white and waiting, arranged for a game that had already been started on the opposite side. Someone had moved through here, and recently, the pieces were still in positions Harry could read in one glance. Ron was already walking the perimeter, reading the board the way Harry had watched him read 100 boards over the year. Ron's face was doing the thing it did, completely focused, all the uncertainty dropping away like ballast, and he was someone else entirely when he was doing this. One game already played, Ron said. Black won by force. Whoever came through took the knight's path. He walked along the side. That leaves us, he traced the route with his eyes. We need to play from here. I'll be the knight. Harry, rook. Hermione, bishop. He looked back at them. We need to win in 7 moves. What about the pieces we replace? Hermione asked. They'll take me, Ron said. He said it the way he said I'll take the pawn sacrifice at the chess board, with the pragmatic calm of someone who had already evaluated the cost. But it'll win the game. He paused. I'll be fine. They don't actually, I know how magical chess works, Harry said. He looked at Ron. You don't have to. Someone has to be the knight, Ron said. And I'm the one who knows how to play it. Go to your positions. 7 moves. For captures, not Ron, not yet, but 3 white pieces that went down hard on the stone floor and didn't get up, and then the White Queen moved on Ron's knight and Harry started forward and Hermione caught his arm. He'll be all right, she said, very quietly. She was watching the board. 3 more moves. She was right. 3 moves later the White King toppled, the rest of the pieces froze, and the door to the next chamber opened. Ron was flat on the board 20 feet away, breathing. Harry went to him first. Ron's eyes were open and he was staring at the ceiling with the dazed expression of someone who'd been hit very hard in the head by something very large. Go, Ron said. I'm fine. Actually fine, not just saying it. He blinked. That was a good game. It was, Harry said. You're sure? Go, Ron said again. I'll be here. Harry looked at Hermione. She looked back at him. I'll stay with him, she said. It cost her something to say it, he could see that, but she said it with clarity. You go. You're the one who can get the stone out of the mirror, Harry. It has to be you. She paused. Be careful. But don't be slow about it. I won't, Harry said. He went. The 4th chamber was fire, purple flames at the entry, black flames at the exit, both impassable without the potion's logic puzzle. 11 bottles on a table, small and large, round and narrow, and a rolled note explaining the rules in handwriting Harry recognized as Snape's. He picked up the note, read it once, set it down. Smallest bottle. Coldest. He found it immediately, 4th from the left, half full, unmistakably cold to the touch in a way that was different from room temperature, different from glass, something that existed in the bottle like a property of the liquid itself. He uncorked it. Thought about Snape in the library, back turned, voice carefully neutral, in case. He drank it in one go. Cold that moved through him like a thought, clean and brief, and then the black flames parted as he walked through them and closed behind him as he came out the other side. The final chamber was everything and nothing. Harry had imagined several versions of this room. He'd built models of it in his head over months of preparation, the mirror in the center, the stone inside the mirror, and whatever was necessary between him and them. He'd prepared for Quirrell. He'd prepared for Voldemort's voice, which he was expecting. He hadn't prepared for the version he walked into, Quirrell, already here, standing before the mirror with his hands at his sides and his back to Harry, and the mirror showing something that was clearly not giving him what he needed. Harry stood in the entrance of the chamber. Quirrell turned around. He wasn't pretending, now. The stutter was entirely gone. He stood differently, with a settled, cold stillness that had nothing to do with nervousness, and his eyes had the quality Harry had seen in defense class, too deep, too old, something behind them that watched with patience and deliberation. Harry Potter, Quirrell said. His voice was calm. I wondered when you'd come. Probably not as soon as you'd have liked, Harry said. He was standing still in the chamber entrance with his wand at his side, not raised, just ready. You've been waiting a while. All year, Quirrell said, pleasantly. Watching you watch me. You're quite good at that. You're not as difficult to read as you think, Harry said. The stutter gave you away first week. Something moved behind Quirrell's eyes. Not his amusement, something else's. The stone is in the mirror, Harry said. You can't get it out. Whatever's in you wants to use it, which means you see yourself using it when you look, which means it doesn't appear in your pocket. He glanced at the mirror. Simple problem. Wrong person looking. Indeed, said Quirrell. Which is why you're here. He raised his wand. Look in the mirror, Harry. I know, Harry said. That's why I came. He looked at Quirrell steadily. But you and I both know you're going to have to make a choice in a minute, and I want to make sure you understand what the choice is before you make it." Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "Quirrell," Harry said, and he wasn't talking to the depth behind the eyes, he was talking to the man himself, whatever was still man. "You're a person. You had a life before this. Whatever promised you things, whatever's in you right now, it's using you. You know that. You've known it all year." He paused. "You don't have to do this." A long silence. The mirror stood between them and the torches were low and the chamber was very still. "He can hear you," Quirrell said, and his voice had a different quality now, a slight strain, as if he were translating from something. "He says you're sentimental." "Maybe," Harry said. "Do you think I'm sentimental?" Quirrell looked at him. Behind his eyes, the depth looked at him. There was a moment that was genuinely a moment, something that could have been different, an inflection point, the kind that history has and doesn't always notice. Then the depth settled, and the man inside it receded, and what was left was entirely what had been using Quirrell all year. "Look in the mirror," Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth, and his voice was the real voice now, the one that belonged to no body, thin and cold and certain as any ancient thing. "Or I will take it from your eyes." Harry looked at the mirror. He stood in front of it and looked at it the way he'd looked at it in December, the same steady presence, and he held clearly in his mind exactly what he was here to do. Not to use the stone. To keep it away from the thing behind Quirrell's eyes. To protect it, and by protecting it, to protect the people who'd be destroyed if Voldemort returned at full power. To protect Hagrid. To protect Ron, lying stunned on the chessboard. To protect Hermione, who'd stayed behind. To protect every person in the world who was going to keep living their lives if tonight went right. The mirror showed him himself. And in his hand, in the image, was the stone. He felt it in his pocket. He closed his fingers around it. It was warm and very small and he didn't look at it. He turned from the mirror. "Give it to me," Voldemort said. "No," Harry said. Quirrell moved. He moved fast, faster than a man that thin and tired should move, and his wand was up, and the spell that came was not a school spell, not the kind first years traded in practice, but something dark and purposeful that Harry stepped to the side of with the same physical certainty he had on a broom, not because he'd planned the specific movement but because he'd spent 3 years learning to read movement before it completed. Harry raised his wand. Not to attack. To protect. Protego from his wand was not the small shield of a first-year exercise. It erupted from him with the same ambient warmth that had been building all year, all 3 years, since Hagrid's cottage and the creatures and the books and the Latin and every morning at the kitchen table. It was, Harry thought, somewhere below the conscious level, the sum of all of it, and it hit Quirrell's spell and shattered it sideways. Quirrell staggered. "He says to kill you," Quirrell said, and his voice was strained now, something genuinely wrong in it, genuinely his own, the man coming forward through the thing wearing him. "He says stop playing." "We're not playing," Harry said. Quirrell lunged. Not with a spell, with his hands, reaching for Harry's collar, reaching for Harry's pocket, and Harry twisted but not fast enough and Quirrell's hands found Harry's wrist and the contact was wrong. Burning wrong. Not pain exactly, something deeper than pain, something that lived in the same register as the wand's warmth but inverted, backwards, like trying to run a current the wrong way through a wire. Harry felt it in every nerve from the wrist up and he heard Quirrell make a sound that was nothing like anything a human throat should produce. Quirrell let go. His hands. His hands where he'd grabbed Harry were red and blistered, steaming slightly, and Quirrell was looking at them with an expression that was split between Quirrell's horror and the thing in him trying to override it. Harry understood in that instant what the prophecy had meant. Power the Dark Lord knew not. Not a spell, not a weapon, not something learned from a book in Hagrid's library, though all of those things had made him who he was. The protection his mother had died to create, which had lived in him all this time, it reacted to direct contact with whatever Voldemort was the way an immune system reacts to a pathogen. Simple. Absolute. He reached out and put both hands on Quirrell's face. He wasn't angry. He wasn't triumphant. He was very calm in the way he was calm before a difficult piece of transfiguration, the same focused presence, and he held Quirrell's face in both hands and he felt the burning run through him like light through glass and he watched Quirrell go still. The screaming that came from Quirrell's mouth was not Quirrell's. It went on for several seconds, thin and voiceless as wind through a crack, and the torches guttered and the mirror's surface rippled and Harry felt the cold rush through and past him, dispersed, looking for a form it didn't have, and then it was gone. Quirrell collapsed. Harry caught him. He lowered him to the floor, which mattered, because Quirrell was a person, or had been, and whatever Voldemort had done to him he still had a body and Harry was not going to drop it on stone. He lowered him gently and Quirrell was breathing, barely, and his eyes were open and they were only his own eyes, nothing behind them, and they found Harry's face. "He's gone," Harry said. "He's gone." Quirrell's mouth moved. No sound came out. But his eyes, for a moment, had something in them that was tired and old and had been somewhere very dark for a very long time, and that something looked at Harry and blinked. "I know," Harry said. "You couldn't help it." He didn't know if that was true. He thought it was probably partly true, which was the most honest he could be. He stayed on the floor beside Quirrell until the breathing went too shallow to be helpful and then he stood up and he put the stone in the very bottom of his robe pocket and he turned toward the door. His head felt wrong. The contact had done something to him, the running of that current, the directness of it, and his legs were not entirely reporting accurately to the rest of him, and the room was doing a slow interested rotation that he was going to have to manage through. He managed 2 steps and then sat down on the floor, because managing through it was apparently going to happen horizontally. The stone was in his pocket. Quirrell was behind him. Voldemort was nothing. He lay down on the cold floor of the chamber and looked at the ceiling and thought, "I should tell Hermione she was right about the devil's snare." He thought about Hagrid, outside the trapdoor, waiting. He thought about his mother's hands, and what they'd built in him, and how it had lived in him all this time in a place he hadn't known to look. He thought, hold on. He held on. He came back to the surface through layers. Sound first, voices, several of them, Professor McGonagall's particular competence rising above others. Then light, which was too bright to be the chamber. Then warmth, which was neither the stone's warmth nor the burning contact warmth but something else, something ambient and familiar that he placed before he opened his eyes. He opened his eyes. Hagrid. Hagrid was sitting beside the infirmary bed with his hands on his knees and his eyes red and his expression that of a man who had been sitting in a specific place being very still for a specific purpose and had just received news that the purpose was resolved. He was not crying. He was very close to having been crying. Harry looked at him. "Hey," Harry said. His voice was rough. "Hey," Hagrid said. His voice was rougher. "I got it," Harry said. "I know," Hagrid said. "Dumbledore told me. He's got the stone." He exhaled, enormously, the breath of a man releasing something that had been pressurized. "He came back. Arrived about 40 minutes after you went down. McGonagall and I were at the trapdoor and he arrived and went straight through." He looked at Harry. "He said you'd already done it by the time he got to the bottom." "Quirrell's dead," Harry said. He said it because it was true and because he needed to say it plainly to someone who wouldn't flinch from it. "I know," Hagrid said. He didn't want to do it. Whatever Voldemort did to him, Harry stopped. He was still in there at the end. He was tired. Hagrid was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah. I believe yeah." Harry looked at the ceiling. The infirmary was quiet around them, early morning light through the high windows. He turned his head back to Hagrid. "Did you write to me?" he asked. "That letter. You said you might have said something you shouldn't have." Hagrid's jaw tightened. "I told someone how to get past Fluffy." I know, Harry said. It wasn't your fault. It was a bit my fault, Hagrid said, with the stubbornness of someone who believed in taking his share of responsibility. Okay, Harry said. A bit. But Quirrell, Voldemort, would have found another way. They'd been trying all year. He paused. You writing to me is the reason I went down there prepared instead of surprised. So it worked out. Hagrid looked at him. You're trying to make me feel better. I'm stating the actual causality, Harry said. Those can both be true at once. Hagrid made a sound that started as a laugh and ended as something else, and he put one enormous hand over his face for a moment, and his shoulders moved. Harry reached across and put his hand on Hagrid's arm, not much, proportionally, but Hagrid dropped his hand and looked at Harry with his red eyes and his very large heart visible in his face. I told ya to be careful, Hagrid said. I was careful, Harry said. Ya also took on Voldemort, Hagrid said. In a basement. At 11 years old. Alone. I was very careful about it, Harry said. Hagrid looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, properly, the furniture-shaking laugh from the mirror, the one Harry had seen and recognized in the image, the one that was the most reliable sound in Harry's world. Harry grinned back at him. "Ya drive me mad," Hagrid said. "I know," Harry said. "But you'll keep me." "Course I will," Hagrid said, and he sounded like the question had never occurred to him. Don't be daft. Chapter 6. What was built? The infirmary had a particular quality in the early morning, before Madame Pomfrey came on her rounds, when the light was new and thin through the high windows and the ward was quiet except for the occasional distant sound of the castle breathing. Harry had been here 3 days. He'd slept through most of the first one, which Madame Pomfrey said was normal after magical exhaustion of that magnitude, and spent the second one in a state of alert boredom that she addressed by confiscating his notebook and threatening a sleeping draft. He'd negotiated the notebook back in exchange for staying horizontal, which he considered a reasonable compromise. Ron came on the second afternoon, arm in a sling, moving with the careful dignity of someone determined not to show they were sore. He sat in the chair Hagrid had occupied and looked at Harry for a moment. "You're okay," he said. "I'm okay," Harry confirmed. "Good." Ron settled back. Hermione cried. "Is she all right?" "She's fine." She was crying because she was relieved, not because anything was wrong. Ron paused. "I may have also, there was a moment when I thought you were, anyway." McGonagall gave me and Hermione 100 points each. She gave you 200. That seems like a lot, Harry said. You stopped Voldemort coming back, Ron said. I think the points are a bit beside the point. He was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of his sling. What was it like? Down there, at the end? Harry looked at the ceiling. He thought about how to answer that honestly. He was gone before I knew it was done, he said. It wasn't a fight, exactly. It was more like, you know when a fire goes out? Not dramatic, just suddenly not there. He paused. Quirrell was harder. He was still in there at the end. Ron was quiet, processing this with the thoughtfulness he brought to the things that actually mattered. What you did, he said finally. With your hands. Dumbledore told us, he said it was your mother's protection. That it reacted to, yes, Harry said. You didn't know for certain it would work, Ron said. It was an observation, not a challenge. No, Harry said. I knew theoretically. From the literature. He glanced at Ron. Hagrid had a book on protective sacrifice magic. Chapter 11. There's a specific mechanism for the residual effect on a protected person and how it responds to direct contact with the original threat. But theory and practice are different, Ron said. Different, Harry agreed. But I'd thought it through and it was the best option and I went with it. He paused. Also Quirrell was burning where he grabbed my wrist, which confirmed the mechanism before I made the contact decision. Ron stared at him. You data gathered in the middle of a fight. Briefly, Harry said. You're a genuinely strange person, Ron said, with the warmth of someone who considered this a selling point. I want to be clear, I mean that in the best possible way. Hermione came in the evening and sat very straight on the edge of the chair and looked at Harry with bright, fierce eyes and said, You should have told me more of what you knew before you went in alone. You were with Ron, Harry said. Ron was fine, Hermione said. Ron regained consciousness 6 minutes after you left. She paused. And I was the one who made him send his owl to get McGonagall instead of going after you myself, which was the right call. But it would have been easier if I'd known you had the potions worked out and the mirror understood Hermione, Harry said. She stopped. You were right about everything, he said. The snare, staying with Ron, sending for McGonagall, all of it. He looked at her. I couldn't have planned this well without you. She looked at him for a moment. Then she unclasped her hands, which had been very tightly clasped, and sat back slightly. I know, she said, with the precision of someone accepting a fact rather than a compliment. I just wanted to say it. Noted, Harry said. For next time. A pause. Next time, she repeated. You think there's a next time? He's not gone, Harry said. Quirrell is gone. Whatever was using Quirrell, whatever Voldemort has become, that's still out there somewhere. Not here, not with a body, not for a long time. But eventually. He looked at them both. But that's future business. Right now the stone is destroyed and everyone's okay and you both did brilliantly. He paused. Ron. The chess game. Ron went slightly pink in the way he did when he was pleased and didn't want to perform pleasure. It was a good board, he said. It was exceptional, Harry said. McGonagall might have cried a little. McGonagall does not cry, Hermione said firmly. Her eyes were bright, Harry said. For McGonagall, that's equivalent. Dumbledore came on the third morning. He came alone, which Harry had expected, and he sat in the chair with the ease of someone who had been in this infirmary many times and had opinions about the comfort of the furniture. He looked at Harry with an expression that contained several things simultaneously, the way Dumbledore's expressions usually did, relief, pride, something that was carrying a weight of its own. How do you feel? He asked. Better than yesterday, Harry said. Madame Pomfrey says one more day. She's usually right, Dumbledore said. He reached into his robe and placed something on the bedside table, a small, wrapped package. Not the stone, he said, reading Harry's expression. I destroyed it. Nicholas agreed. Harry nodded. He'd expected this. He and Perenelle will die, Dumbledore said. Not immediately. They have enough elixir to put their affairs in order. He looked at the table. Nicholas says it is a welcome thing, at 665. That it is time. He paused. I find I cannot fully agree with him, though I understand the logic. You've had a long time to think about mortality, Harry said. I have. It has not made me better at accepting it. Dumbledore looked at him. I want to speak about what happened, Harry. What you did and how you did it. All right, Harry said. You went into those chambers with more preparation than anyone, myself included, had fully accounted for. You understood the defenses, the mechanism of the mirror, the nature of Voldemort's possession. You were, by any measurable standard, ready. He paused. I want you to understand that this was not accidental. The person you are, the preparation, the steadiness, the choices you made down there, that is the result of the last 3 years. I know, Harry said. What I want to be certain of, Dumbledore said carefully, is that you understand what part of that was you, and what part was circumstance. Harry looked at him. You mean Hagrid? I mean the life you were given, Dumbledore said. The childhood you had. He was choosing his words with the care of someone who has thought about a thing for a long time and has found that every version of saying it has a cost. The original plan, the Dursleys, was predicated on a belief that your experience of hardship and isolation would be formative. That it would produce a certain kind of person. It would have, Harry said. Just not the useful kind. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Not the useful kind. Not this kind. He looked at Harry steadily. The prophecy says you have a power Voldemort knows not. I believed, for a long time, that this power was your mother's sacrifice alone. A fixed thing. Present regardless of circumstances. And now? Now I think it was always latent, Dumbledore said, but it was made into what it became, what it was tonight, by how you grew up. By Hagrid's teaching, and Hagrid's example, and the specific kind of love that doesn't protect by keeping you small. He paused. I think if you had grown up at Privet Drive, the power would still have been present. But it would have been buried under things that made it inaccessible. And I planned for the buried version, and received the full one instead. Harry looked at him for a long moment. You're telling me my plan worked better than your plan. I am telling you, Dumbledore said, with the particular grace of a man admitting something he has earned the right to admit, that Hagrid's plan worked better than my plan. You should tell him that, Harry said. I intend to, Dumbledore said. At some length. The room was quiet for a moment. Somewhere outside the window a bird was doing something complicated and cheerful. The prophecy, Harry said. Either must die at the hand of the other. He marked me as his equal. That's still true. It is, Dumbledore said. He didn't soften it. Harry had come, over the year, to value this about him, the willingness to be straight when being straight was what was needed. So he'll come back eventually, Harry said. Whatever form he takes, whatever it takes him, he'll be back and we'll have to finish it. Eventually, Dumbledore said. Then we've got time, Harry said. And I'll be older when it happens, and better prepared. He paused. And I'll have people with me. That's different from the last plan too. Dumbledore looked at him with the expression he'd had outside Hagrid's cottage in June, the one that was deep and old and something like genuine wonder. Yes, he said. That is considerably different. Harry picked up the package from the table. Unwrapped it. Inside was a photograph, moving, slightly faded at the edges, the kind that had been kept carefully for years. Two people, young, laughing at the camera. His mother and father. They were at Hogwarts, Harry recognized the grounds, and they were young enough that he could see the students in them, the not yet formed quality of people who haven't become everything they're going to be. His mother had her arm through his father's and they were both laughing at something off camera, and occasionally his mother looked directly at him, at whoever was holding the camera, with those green eyes. Harry looked at it for a long time. Thank you, he said. It was in the castle archives, Dumbledore said. I thought it was time you had it. Harry put it on the bedside table facing outward, and looked at it for another moment, and then looked at Dumbledore. I saw them in the mirror, he said. In December. All three of us, me and my parents and Hagrid. All together. I know, Dumbledore said. You told me. I left it there, Harry said. I didn't go back. He paused. I have the photo now. The mirror showed me what I wanted and the photo shows me what was real. That's better. Dumbledore said nothing for a moment. Then, very quietly, yes. I think it is. The end-of-year feast was different from any feast Harry had attended. It was different because of the points. Gryffindor had been in last place for most of the year, a situation the Slytherins had been enjoying with a thoroughness Harry found more amusing than annoying, and Dumbledore's addition of the last night points changed everything with the specific theatrical flair of someone who had timed it deliberately and knew exactly what he was doing. The hall went from green draped to red draped in the space of 60 seconds, and the Gryffindor table erupted in the way tables erupt when something has been wanted and earned and finally arrived. Harry was back at the table for it, cleared by Madame Pomfrey that morning, and the noise hit him when he walked in and sat down with the impact of something that was at once enormous and completely right. Ron was already at the table and stood up when Harry arrived, and Hermione was beside him, and Neville, who had lost Gryffindor points for trying to warn them back in September about the midnight duel that never happened and had been carrying the weight of that all year. Neville had received 10 points for pure nerve and was sitting with an expression that was still processing its own happiness. Harry looked at him. "There it is," he said. Neville blinked. "What?" "That face," Harry said. "That's the face from herbology. That's the one you had when you forgot to be afraid." He grinned. "Told you it would happen in other rooms too." Neville looked at him for a moment and then laughed, really laughed, the kind that gets away from you, and the four of them sat in the noise of the feast and ate and argued about everything and nothing, and the points changed the banners and the food appeared and the Hogwarts year closed around them like the last page of a very good chapter. Draco Malfoy, at the Slytherin table, caught Harry's eye across the room. His expression was composed and had the look of someone revising a position. He gave Harry a single, measured nod. Harry nodded back. It wasn't friendship and it wasn't resolution, it was two people registering each other as real, which was a foundation at least. Snape was in the entrance hall the next morning. Harry was carrying his trunk down from the dormitory with Ron's help, navigating the stairs in the particular morning chaos of 300 students trying to leave simultaneously, when he came around the third-floor landing and found Snape coming the other direction, and both of them stopped. Ron kept walking without quite meaning to, carrying his end of the trunk, and it took him 3 steps to realize he was now holding it alone, at which point he put his end down and pretended to check a latch. Snape looked at Harry. He was himself again, the controlled economy, the precise blankness, but there was something in the set of him that was different from the beginning of the year, a calibration that had shifted. "Potter," he said. "Professor Snape," Harry said. A silence. On the staircase below them, students flowed past with trunks and owls and the general exit energy of people escaping. "The potions puzzle," Snape said. "The smallest bottle," Harry said. "Coldest. You told me in the library." "I told you in case," Snape said. "I know," Harry said. "It worked." Snape looked at him with the expression he got when Harry said something that landed somewhere private, and he was quiet for a moment with whatever it landed in. "You have your mother's eyes," he said. He said it the way he said the Bezoar correction, like it cost something and he was paying it. "You have your father's," he stopped. "You have his ability to be completely aggravating while being technically correct." Harry smiled. "I know," he said. "Hagrid says so too." Something moved across Snape's face. Very briefly. Not a smile, something more contained than that, a controlled warmth that had learned to exist in small spaces. "The remedial reading I assigned you in April," Snape said, returning to the precise tone. "The advanced potions theory. You haven't returned the text." "I still need it," Harry said. "Can I keep it over the summer?" "Return it in September," Snape said. "In the condition in which you received it." "It was already annotated when I got it," Harry said. "Your annotations. I've been reading them." Another pause. Longer this time. "And?" Snape said, almost against his will. "Your theory on compound neutralization is better than Libatius Borrage's," Harry said. "And Borrage wrote the textbook." Snape said nothing. But he turned and continued down the stairs with the same controlled movement, and as he went Harry caught, from a sideways angle, the specific tight press of a man not allowing himself an expression that would require him to do something with it. Ron appeared at Harry's elbow. "What was that?" he said. "A conversation," Harry said, picking up his end of the trunk. "It looked like you complimented Snape and he almost died," Ron said. "It was about potions theory," Harry said. "Harry," Ron said, I say this with the deepest respect and genuine concern for your well-being. You are the strangest person I have ever met and I am very glad we're friends." "Likewise," Harry said. "Come on. We'll miss the carriages." The Hogwarts Express left at 11. Harry sat in the compartment with Ron, Hermione, and Neville, and they talked the way you talk at the end of things, reviewing, laughing, planning forward. Hermione already had a reading list for the summer. Ron already had opinions about the reading list. Neville's toad was in his pocket for the first time all year without attempting escape, which everyone agreed was progress. Outside the windows the Scottish Highlands went past in reverse, the mountains shrinking, the sky opening up as the train moved south. Harry watched it and thought about the year. He thought about it the way Hagrid had taught him to think about primary sources, not just what happened but what it meant, what it confirmed, what questions it left open. He had stopped Voldemort, temporarily. He had made friends who knew what he was actually like and chose him anyway. He had understood, standing in the chamber with both hands on Quirrell's face, that the power he had was not separate from who he was, it was made of who he was, which meant it would keep growing with him. He thought about next year. Defense Against the Dark Arts would need a new professor. He had opinions about what he hoped they'd get and thoughts about what they'd probably get instead. He wanted to start actual creature handling coursework, not just theory. The texts were useful but insufficient. He wanted to do more with Transfiguration. He wanted to find out what was wrong with the 7th floor, because there was something wrong with the 7th floor and he hadn't had time this year to address it properly. He thought about Voldemort. About either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. He held this thought and examined it from all sides the way he examined everything, not afraid of it, not dismissive of it, just clear-eyed about what it was. A fact about the future. Not today's fact. Not something that required today's energy. He'd put it in the right drawer and return to it when it was relevant. He thought about his mother, whose hands had built something in him that had protected him twice now without him knowing. He thought about his father, who had left a cloak in Dumbledore's keeping and never come back for it. He thought about the photograph in his trunk, the two of them young and laughing at the Hogwarts grounds, and he thought, I didn't know you. I would have liked to. That's a real thing and I'm going to hold it like a real thing and not like a wound. He thought about the mirror. What he'd seen in it, all of them together, his parents and Hagrid, the table and the cottage and the laugh. The mirror showed you what you wanted most. What he'd wanted most was already substantially real, and the parts that weren't real were gone and couldn't be recovered, and the difference between those two categories was something he'd been learning to hold clearly for 3 years. He was all right. He was genuinely, actually all right in the way that wasn't a performance and didn't require maintenance. Galleon for them, Hermione said. Harry looked at her. For what? Your thoughts, she said. You've been staring out the window for 20 minutes. Thinking about next year, Harry said. And the year after. And whatever it all adds up to eventually. He paused. And about how the remedial potions text Snape gave me in April has better compound neutralization theory than borage. Of course you're thinking about potions theory, Ron said from behind his chocolate frog. Normal people think about summer. Normal people think about their friends going back to their respective houses and missing each other. I'll miss you, Harry said. I'll write. You'd better, Hermione said, with the specificity of a person communicating a real expectation rather than a pleasantry. I'll write back. We can discuss the reading list. I'm not doing the reading list, Ron said. I'm going to do the reading list, but I'm not going to do it until August. That's the same thing, Hermione said. It's emotionally different, Ron said. Neville's toad emerged from his pocket and looked around the compartment with the exploratory expression of a creature finally feeling settled about things. Harry looked at it and thought about Trevor's year, constantly losing itself, constantly found, consistently underestimated, present at the end of the year anyway. He thought Neville and Trevor had quite a lot in common. Trevor, Neville said, catching him. You stay put. Trevor stayed put. King's Cross was a wall of noise after the quieter platforms at Hogsmeade. The train came in and the doors opened and the students poured out with their owls and their trunks and their end-of-year exhaustion and relief, and Harry stepped onto the platform and stopped for a moment just to feel it. The shift from the train's contained world to this larger, louder one, the Muggle station pressing its reality up against the magical one. Hagrid found him before he found Hagrid. Which was, in fairness, not difficult, given the size differential. Harry heard him first, the particular carrying quality of his voice, moving through the crowd with the ease of something that didn't have to navigate around people because people navigated around it, and then saw him, enormous and beaming, hair wild from the long ride down, pushing through the crowd with Fong's lead in one hand. Fong saw Harry first. Fong's entire body became an expression of joy. Harry crouched down and caught Fong's front paws before they could reach his face, which worked for approximately half a second before Fong planted both paws on his shoulders anyway, and Harry ended up sitting on the platform floor being enthusiastically greeted by a dog the size of a small sofa. "Fong," Hagrid said, from somewhere above. "Fong, enough. He's all right. Let him up." Fong retreated with great reluctance. Harry got up, brushed off his robes, and looked up at Hagrid, who was looking down at him with an expression that had been working itself out for the 10-hour train journey. By the look of it, everything he'd wanted to say already fully assembled and now just being delivered in the way it always was, simply and without performance. "There ya are," Hagrid said. "Here I am," Harry said. "Yeah, look good," Hagrid said. "A bit thin still. I've been cooking." He had, visibly, brought something, a bag from which the smell of bread was unmistakably escaping. "Don't argue, it's the good bread." Harry laughed. He laughed the way he laughed in the cottage, the easy unconsidered kind. "I'm not arguing about the bread." "Good." Hagrid's expression did the thing it did when he was holding something large and not quite letting it out yet. He looked at Harry with those deep, warm, careful eyes, and he said, quietly under the noise of the platform, "Dumbledore wrote to me. Told me what you did. All of it. The preparations and the mirror and the—" He stopped. Started again. "He told me everything." Harry looked at him. "He also told me something else," Hagrid said. "About the plan he had. The original plan. Privet Drive and what he thought it would, what he thought you'd need to be." He paused. "He told me he was wrong." "He told you in a letter?" Harry said. 3 letters, Hagrid said. "He wrote 3 letters. Said he needed more than one try to say it right." He reached into his coat and produced a folded envelope. "Last one's for you. Said I'd probably understand it better for having read the first 2. Harry took it. He looked at the outside, his name in Dumbledore's hand, and put it in his pocket for later, for somewhere quieter. Hagrid was watching him. "You all right?" he asked. He asked it the way he always asked it, not as a pleasantry, as an actual question. Harry looked around the platform. Ron was being absorbed into a cluster of redheads that radiated warmth and volume in equal measure. He caught Harry's eye across the crowd and raised a hand. Hermione was with her parents, 2 very ordinary-looking muggles who were watching the magical chaos around them with the bemused expressions of people who hadn't fully acclimatized to this yet. Neville was being hugged by a small, fierce-looking old woman who appeared to be trying to compress him. Draco was disappearing through the barrier with his parents, and Lucius Malfoy was exactly what Harry would have expected, and Narcissa Malfoy was watching her son with an attention that was something more honest than the public face. Harry looked at all of it and then looked back at Hagrid. "Yeah," he said. "I'm all right. Not just saying it." "Not just saying it," Harry said. He smiled. "I'm genuinely, actually all right. Ask me a hard question and I'll prove it." Hagrid looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "What do ya want for dinner tonight?" "Something that isn't castle food," Harry said immediately. The soup here is good but the bread is, don't compare it to the bread, Hagrid said. The bread at home is objectively better, Harry said. That's scientific fact, Hagrid agreed, satisfied. They started moving through the crowd toward the barrier, Fong weaving between them with the specific contentment of a dog going in the direction of home. Harry had his trunk, Hedwig's cage, the bag of books, the photograph in his trunk and the letter in his pocket and the stone's warmth still faintly present in the robe where it had sat. He had all of it, the year, the chambers, the mirror, the moment with Quirrell, the moment before when Dumbledore had said Hagrid's plan worked better than my plan. He had something else too. He'd had it since March 3 years ago, since a motorbike and a glass jar going green, since a birthday card on a shelf that was the only birthday card on a shelf, but he understood it differently now, the way you understand a thing differently when you've tested it under pressure and found it holds. He had been carried out of a place that was diminishing him by someone who decided, without authority and against advice and with his whole enormous stubborn heart, that Harry was worth going to the ministry for. And everything that had come from that decision, the cottage, the creatures, the books and the Latin and the arguments over dinner, the steady hands and the simple love and the genuine belief in what Harry could become, all of it was present in that chamber in the castle's depths when he'd stood in front of Quirrell and been completely, fundamentally unafraid. That was what you built when you loved someone correctly. Not safety. Not smallness. Not protection from everything. Something that lived in them and grew with them and was there when they needed it, as permanent and sourceless as warmth. His mother had known this. Hagrid had known this without knowing he knew it. Dumbledore had needed 3 letters to say it. Harry knew it now. He went through the barrier and the station noise closed over them and the world got larger and the summer opened up ahead, long and warm and full of everything next year would be. Hagrid was talking about the hippogriff. The opinions were apparently ongoing and had developed new dimensions while Harry was at school, and Hagrid recounted them with the full enthusiasm of someone who found dignity disputes between animals deeply compelling, and Harry walked beside him through the London morning and listened and asked questions and felt the warmth of his wand in his pocket and the photograph in his trunk and the letter in his pocket and all 3 years in his bones. In the bread bag, unmistakably, the good bread. The summer ahead, unmistakably, theirs. He read Dumbledore's letter on the train going north, the smaller train, the Muggle one up through the backbone of England toward Scotland, while Hagrid dozed opposite him and Fong slept across both their feet. The station lights went past the window in long orange streaks. The letter was 1 page. Dumbledore's handwriting, careful and clear. Dear Harry, I have been in this work long enough to know that wisdom arrives slowly and is usually delivered by someone you underestimated. In this case, that someone is a half-giant with a pink umbrella and an extraordinary capacity to love without condition or strategy. What you did this year you did not do because fate required it of you. You did it because of who you have become, and who you have become is the result of years of deliberate, unglamorous, daily love. I planned for a Harry Potter shaped by isolation and necessity. I received a Harry Potter shaped by belonging and trust. I was wrong in the most instructive way possible, wrong in a way that showed me something truer than what I thought I knew. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask only that you know I understand now what was built, and by whom, and that I will spend whatever time I have left trying to deserve to be part of it. The future still asks something hard of you. We both know it does. But you will go toward it as yourself, fully, freely, without anything buried that shouldn't be buried, and that changes everything. With considerable respect and deep gratitude, Albus Dumbledore. Harry read it twice. Then he folded it and put it back in the envelope and looked at the window, where the lights had thinned out and the dark was the wide, clean dark of countryside. Across from him, Hagrid made a sound in his sleep that was either a word or a snore and probably both. Fong shifted. The train moved north through the night toward the highlands, toward the cottage and the loch and the bread and the creatures and the beginning of the summer and whatever came next, and Harry sat in the dark of the carriage and was still for a moment, and the wand in his pocket was warm, and the glass jar in Hagrid's coat pocket, he was certain of it, was glowing the quiet, steady, uninterrupted green of a thing that had finally settled.